Hi everyone, my name is Yasin and I am a PhD candidate and also I am an English instructor in Morocco, in Tangier. Currently I'm doing my PhD in media studies and my research is about media in the 21st century, mainly Netflix. So my topic, as you can see, is binge watching and academic achievements among university students. And of course, I have a case study from the United States. So my research agenda is as follows. So I will introduce my topic and then I'm going to talk about my research goal or aim, research questions, then I will highlight some important points in the literature review. Then I'll be sharing with you my methods, results, and a little notes about discussion. Then I will conclude. So let's get started. So the advancement, as you know, the advancement of subscription video in demand services such as Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and so on over the last few years. People consumption, especially high school, university students and high school students as well. People consumption has radically changed. So the way these university students view television or the way of viewing television has radically changed. Their viewing habits also have changed, leading them to consume an entire series or a show in a single sitting, what researchers refer to as binge watching. So this binge watching started with COVID-19. So since students didn't have the chance to go to in-person classrooms, so they had to stay at home. So they have plenty of time in order to binge watch and consume entire series in a single sitting. So since college students are the high binge watching category, spend a lot of time binge watching their favorite series, sometimes rather than sticking to their academic obligations. So as a result, they may get depressed and finally fail in their studies. So this is the purpose of this research. So the aim is that since college students may binge watch series or TV shows for the purpose of forgetting about school stress or social interaction and enhancing enjoyment. So yet additional empirical studies need to be conducted if binge watching influences academic achievement or not. And this is my purpose, this is my goal behind this study, is to see if binge watching, if students spend a lot of time consuming episodes of series on Netflix or other streaming platforms, has any effects on their academic achievements. So as you can see, so this current study aims at understanding their binge watching behavior and if there is any effects behind that. So based on that, three research questions are highlighted. The first research question is, how do college students conceptualize binge watching? How do they define it? So definitions depends from one student to another. So the way I see it is not like the other one sees it, and so on and so forth. The second research question is, what are the salient motives? What are the motivations behind watching subscription video on demand series and shows? Also, the last question, what are the perceived effects? Are there any effects behind binge watching series and shows? Okay, and are there any effects on students' academic achievements? So in the literature review, as you can see, although many researchers have investigated the phenomena of binge watching, they haven't been able to establish a standardized definition of it. So my research is based on uses and gratification theory. So use and gratification theory is an approach to understanding why and how people actively seek certain media to satisfy their needs. So rather, the audience has the power over their media consumption and assumes an active role in interpreting and integrating media in their own lives. So right now, with these easy access to platforms such as Netflix, Amazon, and so on, it's easy for students to control these media, to use this whenever they want. So that's the important thing of focusing on the uses and gratification theory. So as you can see, concerning the methods, sample characteristics included 103 students from a liberal arts college in the northeast of the United States, and students were aged between 18 and 25 years old. Most of the participants were females, and reported they were non-Hispanic whites, and all of them, they are taking between 3 to 4 courses. And of course, 100%, all of them, they reported that they stream subscription video on demand services. Okay, the procedure and data analysis of this research. So students in May 2021 received notifications on Facebook and email invitations to participate in this online survey. Also, I had the chance to contact other professors at the university in order to share it with their students. So the total of 103 college students responded to the survey, and most of them, as I said earlier, were females. And it took them approximately 10 minutes to fill out this online survey. So as you can see, results concerning the first question, college, how the students conceptualize the concept of binge watching. So the majority of students, more than 40%, define binge watching as watching multiple episodes of a television program in a rapid succession, typically by means of DVDs or digital streaming. More than 15% define binge watching as watching series for more than 5 hours in one sitting. And also we have other definitions. So it depends on different students. We had different conceptualizations, different definitions of binge watching. The salient motives or the motivations behind watching this series. So results indicate that college students, specifically at a university northeast of the United States, binge watch this series for a couple of reasons. So most of them, 20.2% of cases, binge watch their favorite TV programs to feel less lonely, to escape from reality, with 33%. Also others, they binge watch this series in order to avoid doing their homework. And this is with the percentage of 90.7%. Also 19.2% consume this series in order to forget about their academic obligations. So there were different motivations because of humorous content, educational content, and these are the main things why students binge watch these series. So yet some college students binge watch because they see it as a normal thing among college students, while others use it to cope with boredom. So to summarize, college students binge watch series for multiple reasons, and this is why it may have kind of effects on your academic obligations. So the third important question behind is binge watching this series has any effects on their academic achievements or no? So the obtained results indicate that there is no significant correlation between variables except between student gender and the type of TV content they prefer streaming and their favorite genres. So all participants prefer streaming series. So all students who did not mention their gender stream series. Whereas there exists a large differentiation between these three categories for females, unexpectedly, females watch romantic series at a low frequency, but almost the same as males. So even if students spend a lot of time consuming their favorite series or shows on these streaming platforms, results indicate that they have no effects on their academic achievements. So the discussion of my results were based on three important things: how students define binge watching, and as I said before, I discovered that there is different conceptualization, different definitions of binge watching. And also there were different motivations of binge watching among college students in order to feel less lonely, to cope with boredom, to escape from reality, and sometimes occupied. So sometimes when they feel stressed by doing homework and activities, homework and like home obligations or academic obligations, they want to escape and try to binge watch these series. So results, as I said earlier, binge watching has no effects on these, on students' academic achievements at the target university I was dealing with. So even students binge watch, spend a lot of time, consuming these series, it doesn't have any effects on their academic achievements. So students can balance, they can do their homework, they can study, and at the same time, they can binge watch their favorite series. To conclude, so since binge watching has become very popular nowadays among college students, Netflix continues to grow. So the purpose of this study was to understand how college students conceptualize, how do they define binge watching, what motivated them to binge watch serials, and to see if they were academically distracted by binge watching series and shows. As I mentioned earlier, data was collected from a liberal arts college in the United States and was analyzed by the statistical data analysis, SPSS. So results indicated that students had different perceptions of binge watching and various motivations that pushed them to consume those series in one go. Results also showed that binge watching has no effects on college students, on students' academic achievements. I think that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Yassine. That's good news that we will have for Netflix now. You can kind of watch Netflix without that overhanging feeling of guilt. Dr. Rushi is an assistant professor in the area of business communication at IIM in Jammu. She holds a PhD in linguistics with specialization in psycholinguistics from the Center for Advanced Studies in Linguistics, University of Delhi. Her work has encompassed the study of lexical units in language of the special population and for English language learners. Excuse me. Her prime area of research interests are in child language, language teaching, language impairment in child's language, excuse me, adult language, language intervention strategies, and teaching of English to speakers of other languages. Tessel, thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you so much. First of all, hello to all. A very warm namaste from my end. I think I have the, yes, I can share the screen. Thank you so much. So I'll be starting straight off with my presentation, the online teaching of business communication under the COVID-19 circumstances in India, its impact on the learner's attitude and the learning apprehensions. So my basic research agenda was to understand that what has been the effect on the learners while they were learning a subject like business communication, which requires a lot of interaction in an online setup. Although I'll be using this term business communication repeatedly, but I would request you to take it more like in, because if I use the term English for specific purpose, it becomes an umbrella term. There are a lot of things included in it. That's why I have specified the subject. But otherwise, it's more about teaching English for specific purpose to professionals. And in our case, this was the MBA students, the students who are into the B schools in various schools in India. So basically, with the introduction part, I think it's pretty much obvious that how COVID has affected every aspect, every domain of our lives. Researchers have been exploring how the education system has been affected by this pandemic, and we have had very specific studies in China by Huang et al. In 2020, Singapore by Lim 2020, and in Europe, the Europe Commission in 2020 had conducted this research, as in how the transition from offline to online mode of teaching affected, or what are the changes that have been brought about by this transition. But very few studies have reflected on the abrupt switch to the online mode that are subject specific and that are learners oriented. So that's why this study aims at two prime points. That is, firstly, to identify the effectiveness of online teaching of business communication, or in general English for specific purpose, from the student's perspective, and what are the apprehensions that have to be considered so that we can make some necessary actions, so that we can make some necessary changes in the pedagogy as well. Thus, I think I clicked on something which was, yeah. So this current research basically covered 5 aspects about teaching of business communication. The first was its effectiveness while we are teaching it in the online mode. We have had a lot of talks. We did have a talk in the morning by the professor stating that how inclusion of technology is required in the ESP classes. But here we had a compulsion. How was it effective? Was it even effective, or was it a kind of a backlash? Secondly, we need to know about the student interaction during the online sessions with each other as well as with the teacher. We need to understand the quality of the course content for online teaching. That what course did we adapt to the online sessions, or everything that was being taught offline has been exactly superimposed onto the online sessions as well. Then, of course, about the relevance of the assessment procedure and the access and comfort of technology during these online sessions. So based on these 5 aspects that are to be explored, we decided to have these 3 questions, which is online teaching for business communication effective with respect to these 5 aspects? Which aspect has been severely affected, and what are the apprehensions that the students have developed for these? So the literature review of online teaching during the pandemic basically tells us that the technical and the methodological problems of information sharing and management due to online portal did occur. Like there were chip problems in there, and this change was not a nice transition, but more of a compulsion that was imposed onto us. So earlier, when people had been saying that online teaching is easier to access, it promotes flexibility, there is a lot of space and time for the students, this kind of online teaching that happened, we also saw that by Sayer et al. 2020, that there was a decrease in the number of study hours by the students, and the academic performance of the students also went down. So something happened with this kind of online teaching that affected the learners. What was that? Well, basically, online teaching can deploy asynchronous or synchronous communication. Where in asynchronous communication, we means you have transition of information that can be viewed at any given point of time. You have a set of lectures. The students can have the access to them for 24/7, and it's at their convenience. This was before the pandemic most of the time, but synchronous means that it is primarily, it has to be that everyone is sitting in the same, within the same forte. They are sitting in the same zone basically and attending a lecture. This was primarily the modus that was employed in the Indian education system while shifting to online teaching. So with the online learning environment, Kamble et al. Has pointed out that automatically any kind of classroom, be it for maths, be it for English, be it for history, it turned into an instructor-led setup. Now with that kind of setup, there were problems not just in India, but again in a US setup, wherein they require some face-to-face field activities. They realize this kind of emergency remote teaching, which is also another name for online teaching, they realized that there was a decrease in the face-to-face activities. There were challenges to these face-to-face activities. The same, of course, was there with the online teaching of business communication as well. So, it is very necessary to review the relevance of online teaching, although we have always been supporting the ICT, the idea of including a lot of technology, and into this new setup and its effectiveness according to the subject specificity. In the case of teaching of business communication, student participation cannot be overlooked. We cannot put it at stake. Any traditional classroom setting requires the students to be more responsible, but for an ESP classroom, it's even more than that. We need time management. We need higher motivation from them. Online classroom teaching, online teaching for business communication had some problems over here. So Sampath and Zelpur in 2010 and Baz in 2016 has talked about the ICT, about how do you have to have a lot of technology. The inclusion of technology into the language learning classroom actually enables the students' learning opportunities. It even widens the students' learning opportunity. But due to the current pandemic, the forced transition to online teaching caused a lot of deviations, disruptions, and even backing off by the students of learning. So that is where we actually come to the idea of that what is happening with the students with the advent of this new online setup for a subject like professional communication or business communication, which definitely requires technology, but equal interaction. What happens to a subject like business communication that cannot be teacher-centered, but turns into a teacher-centered setup because of the online language, online teaching setup? So for this, we have we decided to take a feedback or basically observe 227 students from the B schools. They were learning business communication for 3 terms, and in all the 3 consecutive terms, they were in the online mode only. They have had a kind of an introduction, or they have had their courses in professional communication, so a different name, but definitely very similar to business communication in their undergrad programs, but those classes were attended in person. So these students actually attended these classes in the online mode for business communication for the first time. The interesting part was that they were attending these classes from different parts of the country. So they had a lot of different setups. Now, some of you may say they are all in the same classroom, within the same course, and with the same set of teachers, but they are in different parts of the country, hence facing a lot of different issues as well. There were 143 males and 84 females, all the B school students within the age group of 21 to 25. For the methodology, we asked them to fill in a Google form. This was in a form of a questionnaire. There were 25 questions in it. The 20 questions were about general and the general aspect of the online teaching. We didn't try to look for their perceptions about business communication. But the last 20 questions were only about those 5 aspects that we discussed in the beginning based on business communication. This was on a 5-point Likert scale. So, and the second part, where we are trying to explore the apprehensions, these were just yes/no questions. I think it's not very clear on the screen for the time being. We'll see that what happens in the results. So coming to the results, if you look at this, I hope the labels are clear. So for a general perception, students' perception on general online teaching, we see in this part that the extreme left shows dissatisfaction and extreme right is showing satisfaction. We do see that a pattern is there that students are not ready to, or were not very satisfied with the idea of online teaching. If they're asked to compare the two or prefer the two, they'll always prefer face-to-face teaching, although it means sitting in the class for 2 to 3 hours with the teacher. They're happy with that after facing this kind of a setup. And internet availability, again, is a major problem when it comes to the problems that are created because of the online teaching. When we come to the effectiveness of online teaching in general, in specific with the business communication, we see that online teaching for business communication is definitely preferred in specific circumstances. They believe that it cannot go on forever. We can have 1 or 2 classes, maybe 3, maybe 4 or 5 sessions for that, but not always. They believe that online teaching is problematic for sure, and is definitely not a very good alternative for a regular business communication classrooms. And saying that, the last part over here, which clearly states, which clearly shows how dissatisfied they are when we say that can business communication be taught through online teaching forever, it's a complete no from their end. When we talk about participation interaction, well, they did feel that the teacher accessibility was pretty much spread over. They believe in it, they are okay with it, they're not okay with it. Student-teacher interaction was also not very much hampered, but if you look at there, the peer interaction and student participation has definitely been hampered, which automatically leads to a high non-attentiveness by the students. So the students felt that after one point of time, they're unable to pay attention to these classes because they are not able to participate from their end. It's only when the teachers call out their names, that is the only time that they can speak. The course content was not at all, it was not at all liked by the students, because they said that it was not relevant, it was not made according to the or accustomed to the online teaching. Everything that was being taught in an offline classroom has been posted over here. The accessibility was good enough, because in these classes usually the students were provided online online links, or they were given handouts through emails. But with the easy part, they believe that the course was too numb, and thus you cannot say it was any kind of a challenge that they faced while learning the course. If we talk about the assessment, what was the assessment procedure? Well, they didn't find it either relevant or anything that helps them in retaining in this. The assessment procedure was not good enough for them to believe in the fact that they have retained something out of it. It was just about they'll go in there, write down whatever they have understood or not understood, and come out. And a prime reason for this is that online teaching has, for business communication, has suddenly gone from application based to open book class, open book test. So in an open book test, they as a individual feedback, they did say that we are actually not studying anything. We know that there is a keyword we look forward to, and we'll just answer it through that way. Thus, the relevancy, the retention, and the performance has all gone bad with the assessment through the online mode. The last part is the access and comfort of technology for online teaching. Well, it's just not it's just a kind of a utopia if we believe that we can have a class without any technical disruption. So every student, every teacher faced the technical disruption at least once in these classes. The audio or the video quality has not been basically identified upon. It's not great, it's not good. And we have had actually sessions on different platforms like Zoom, MS Teams, Google platform. Everywhere the scenario was same. Thus, the platform quality was also not appreciated. If we come to the second part, where we talk about the apprehensions towards the online teaching, we look at these questions and we see that students are no longer organized for these online classes, because they're just like, it's just like kind of a binge watching. Just sit with there, have a nice glass of Coke and a bag of chips, and the teacher is speaking. You don't even need to switch off on your cameras. The comfort of the online teaching is definitely missing there. I have a very interesting point here that they have clearly said yes to the fact that they hesitate to ask questions frequently in online sessions, because they feel that they'll be the ones who will be in difficulty, or who will be asked by the teacher that why were you not paying attention. And the ninth question was I was happy with the honesty of the students, but it's also a concern where they say that it is difficult to stay attentive in online classrooms. 65% of the students agreed that they can't stay attentive throughout. So in this case, like whatever we have seen, so basically, we've seen that the effectiveness of online teaching or the student interaction during online sessions have all been affected very badly. Because of the time constraint, I'll just skip out the discussion part, but because we have discussed that pretty much in details in the graph section, I would like to come to the conclusion where I see that the results from the above study conclude that we need to develop more interactive methods or more interactive sessions so that we can retain the students' attention. I have now, after this report or after these results, I have become a strong supporter of asynchronous format of sessions, rather than having a synchronous format or synchronous teaching for business communication, because we need to make them motivated to learn. We want them to think about various things. So if you are sitting in a session where everyone has to be there for 2 hours, and there is an activity that requires them to think for 15 minutes, you do not know whether they are thinking or not, because they know after 2 hours, nobody will even be concerned about what we have done in the classroom. Nobody is noticing us. Thus, rather than sitting in the same classroom for 2 hours, it's better to have an asynchronous style of teaching, wherein we can have 1 hour of the session for instructions and 1 hour for the students to use in the day, any time of the day, for learning procedure. Teachers can actually record their own sessions, and the same can be viewed by the students anytime they want to. And rather than having 3 sessions a week, it's better just to have 1 session a week where we can talk about the rest of the 2 sessions that the students conducted at their own, or the students carried out the activities on their own after following the instructions. you need to be very careful about the facts. We have to be very careful about the fact that teachers have been putting in their efforts. They want to make their classes interesting, specifically for, specifically for an classroom for business communication, which has to be high on interaction. But the online classroom demands amendments to the pedagogy. It demands amendments to the course content. So for a subject like communication, the 5 domains that we have discussed, they all have to be kept under consideration. I believe that it's only with the synchronous and the asynchronous part can we do away with all, we can actually cater to the problems in all the 5 domains. So there is a strict need to revise the course for business communication. In a traditional classroom, it's easy to have face-to-face activities. It's easy to have face-to-face discussion. Online classrooms have a lot of restrictions, and because of these restrictions, we need to understand the students' problems, the students' apprehensions, and hence bring about a change, so that rather than having those regular everyday 9 to 10 classes, we should actually have classes wherein students are learning and not just sitting there for attendance. And I thank you to all of you for listening to me. Thanks a lot.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Rishi. Very relevant study. I'm sure we all have absolute direct experience with everything that you said, and some of your conclusions are very insightful as well. I know initially at the start with COVID-19, that was one of the issues that I had, or that I think many people had, that our curriculum and content just went from a face-to-face, and we just transferred it automatically online and expected similar results. But your conclusions hit the nail on the head. We need totally new ideas about how to approach the entire pedagogy and how we're going to really tackle these issues. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Very valuable.
Thank you so much.
This is Mr. Julian Sayer. He teaches English and research at the Universidad Santo Tomas in the Philippines in the senior high school department. His research includes sociolinguistics, second language writing, critical writing, stylistics, critical language pedagogy, and education studies. He's now serving as a member of the editorial board of various international journals in education and language studies. Similarly, he also serves as a peer reviewer of different peer-reviewed journals and conferences on social sciences and humanities and sciences. Welcome, Mr. Julian. And how are you this afternoon? This morning, this evening,
good afternoon. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the kind introduction.
Thank you very much.
All right, so this study is just a part of my dissertation. Okay, so basically, it's just the little part of my major study to finish my program in the a PhD in English language education at Philippine Normal University. This paper is titled A Rethinking Criticality Approach in Virtual Language Instructions in the Philippine Basic Education. Once again, I'm Julian Sayer from the University of Santo Tomas in Manila, the Philippines. So we're focusing basically on critical thinking skills. In the Philippine basic education and even in the higher education, this particular skill is highly emphasized, especially among the learners. In fact, in the recent implementation of the K-12 program, the additional 2 years at senior high school, this criticality and the creativity of learners' thinking is highlighted and emphasized in preparation for their tertiary level. However, in the observations made, especially during the pandemic, learners appear to be more passive in their online engagement. Long before the pandemic and long before the observation of the online instruction, Kumarava de Bello in 2003 has already mentioned of this passivity and unmotivated behavior of the learners, especially among the Asian learners, that includes the Filipinos, because he said that Asian learners are very generally passive and reticent in the classroom engagement. Accordingly, passive learning happens because of the strange concepts that learners cannot associate themselves in the entire process of learning. For Paulo Freire, banking model remains dominant in today's education that works in the spirit of empowerment, motivation, and agency. So when we talk about banking model of education, there's so much emphasis on the role of the teachers. We teachers are called as all-knowing. We know, we talk a lot, we choose the activities, the concept to be offered to the learners. We give information, views, and ideas. And primarily our experiences, our knowledge become the primary source of learning among the learners. On the other hand, learners appear to be empty cups. It seems that they don't know, they just listen, they just follow, they just accept what the teacher asks them to do. Their stories and their experiences and their authentic knowledge become secondary source of learning on their end. In the end, learners remain to be very passive and they are just serving to be spectators and not participants in the entire learning process. This study is anchored highly on critical pedagogy introduced by Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator. But historically speaking, he did not use the word critical pedagogy, but instead he used conscientization, by which he emphasized that teaching is a political act. Teaching is a social consciousness. It's a means of humanization and conscientization. When we say conscientization, it allows learners to understand their role in a bigger community or in their society, for them to understand and to recognize those irregularities and inequalities for them to address. And in the end, they could provide a solution or solutions to those inequalities and problems that they have observed or experienced. In this conscientization or critical pedagogy, he tend to reject the powerful existence of the banking model of education, which I just presented, and that can be possibly done by introducing the dialogic method of teaching and learning. Aside from the critical pedagogy or the conscientization by Paulo Freire, I also adopt the critical thinking criteria for evaluating online discussion by Arla Bernstein and Carol Isaac of 2018. It says here there that in order for us to identify or to determine if students meet that or develop the critical thinking skills, they should develop as well those micro skills that compose that criticality, such as problematizing, clarifying issues, reasoning, synthesizing ideas, referencing, and finally, providing solutions, which is also leading to the problematization. So why do we need to have criticality in the instructions? The word critical is not new to us. It's always a favorite among the teachers. Every time we prepare documents like the lesson plan or the curriculum guide, the word critical is always there. But the question is, to what extent do we really materialize criticality in the instruction? So basically for Freire, criticality is instrumental for us to get out of conventions which seem to fossilize learning. Number two, to redirect the goals to make the learning more pragmatic, to make the learners or to be self-directed, self-monitored, and self-corrective. And finally, to introduce a better, if not the best avenue for a greater understanding, of course, as a means of empowering the learners. So generally, this study attempted to determine how virtual classroom serves as a venue for absorbing critical language pedagogy as a classroom approach that empowers learners through their active participation. Hence, a virtual classroom further defines student-centeredness, where voices produce authentic knowledge and critical thinking skills. Specifically, this study sought to determine the following. First one, virtual classroom strategies that support critical language pedagogy. Then we have features of classroom discourse that build critical engagement. And finally, the role and impact of dialogic and community-based classroom approaches in promoting student-centeredness and critical thinking in virtual classrooms. This study is a qualitative paper. The corpora that were used in this particular study were the recorded online classroom proceedings of at least 3 sections, from the senior high school in a premier Catholic university in Manila, the Philippines. That's in the school year 2020-2021. And after the transcription of those recordings, I did a coding scheme and then eventually the thematic analysis. Now for the result and the discussion for the first objective or first goal, constructing critical pedagogy via virtual classroom, we're after the strategies in the engagement. Okay, first one is following the model that I used. Okay, I tried to see if the first strategy is observe or highly employed in the learning of the language. Unfortunately, learners poorly engage themselves in problematizing issues and social activities that directly or indirectly affect them. Instead of initiating the topics that problematize issues, their role is limited only to responding to the teacher-initiated talks and questions. The analysis of the data only show that learners problematize or concerns or questions limited to the nature of the activities, such as the date of submissions and the clarity of instructions. In terms of clarifying issues, as observed by the researcher, okay, learners have minimal engagement as well with the clarifying of issues. Responses and reactions were given only if teacher asked them to give their opinion, but they tend to they fail to initiate their own initiated discourse as far as clarifying issues are concerned. Indeed, majority of the initiated conversation were about the teacher's talk. Worst scenario is teacher's questions were even answered by yourself. Those identified clarifications like problematizing is highly associated to the nature and objectives of the task. The third strategy based from the model is the use of logical argument or the reasoning. Through coding of the online classroom proceedings, it is also observed that learners do not engage in logical argument or reasoning, except if the issue being raised by the teacher is about grading system or assessment. Arguments were seen only when learners asked for considerations to their outputs or to the submission date of their works. Reasoning becomes actively involved because of their personal reasons to their appeal, but not to the enrichment of the concept presented in the subject or in the discipline. Next one is on the synthesizing ideas. In the transcribed classroom recording, synthesis did not occur even in a single circumstance. On the other hand, the strategy was done by the teacher as they tend to act on their instructions. This proves that learners do not develop skills on summarizing and relating concepts and key issues that comprise the entire flow of discussion. Like other strategies, classroom is dominantly a teacher-controlled learning space. Next one is on referencing. This strategy was also not observed in the online class or classes. In case learners gave their ideas about the topic, they just expressed their opinion without the support of evidences that strengthen the discourse. So primarily, the ideas being constructed in their engagement in their English class is purely opinionated, hence their level of argument is so weak. And then we have solving issues with a poor establishment of the preliminary components of critical thinking. Solving issues was not also constructed except the offering of the personal views about the issues. To summarize, okay, the result in problem number 1, results revealed that the learners do not successfully show their critical thinking because of the following. First one, dominant teachers talk and initiated discourse. Number 2, lack of opportunity for the learners to engage, such as questions that promote criticality. Number 3, lack of online activities that invite learners to show their critical and creative thinking. Then we also have lack of critical assessments that challenge learners' active engagement. Then lack of flexible and inclusive approaches. Because as observed in those recordings or in the corpora of this study, the teacher is highly controlled by the lecture-based approaches in the classroom. We also have too much in the standardizations in the activities and assessment. Remember that when we talk about critical pedagogy and even critical thinking, the word standardization becomes enemy of it because it tends to limit what students can offer in producing authentic knowledge. Number 7, they also have the lack of connection of the language learning to social reality. In this case, language is limited to the rules. Language is limited to the structure, but it's very seldom that language is being associated to the reality of their life or the social reality. And finally, use of unfamiliar and strange examples and tools for the learning. For number two, we're into the features of critical engagements in an online classroom. Despite poor development of critical thinking skills, there are minimal, okay, minimal. I'd like to highlight the word minimal. In the entire study, this may serve as very irrelevant, but I just to point out that the following identified features may actually serve as one way of developing critical thinking skills among the learners, but unfortunately, they were not given proper attention. Okay, so this includes the following: localized instructions and materials through microculture. There are instances that teachers or even some of the participants or interlocutors have already used the local materials, local instructions that would attract learners to actively engage in the process of learning, but eventually these were not properly attended. Okay, and when we talk about the localized instructions and materials through microculture, we may be dealing with the perspective, okay, the role of their culture in the learning of the language, the practices, the different local practices that learners know and do in their local community that may serve as tool for them to penetrate the learning of L2. And finally, the inclusion of the products present in their localities or in their communities. Remember that Vygotsky highlighted the use of sociocultural theory. He justifies L1 used by providing a powerful explanatory framework for conceptualizing what is involved in the language learning that is highlighted and mediated by cultural artifacts. Accordingly, this theory also upholds a dialectical relation between the learner and the social world. In that case, even if we are in the L2 classroom, the first language of the learners can serve as a tool for them to even learn the second language because of its cultural identity that is helpful for them in the process. Speaking of L1, the use of L1 still predominantly not acknowledged in the Philippine classrooms because of the implementation of English-only policy in most academic institutions. This lack of recognition to the L1 as a language resource in L2 class appears to be oppressive that hinder the participation of the learners in the active engagement. It was reported that students employ their first language to move the task along, strengthen the focus or attention to the task and interpersonal interaction among the members. In fact, it was also claimed by several studies that the use of their first language is also instrumental for the learners to develop high-order activities, as it is also, or it can construct their identity, agency, and motivation to participate, specifically to question the observed inequalities, providing authentic knowledge, dissecting issues, and providing solutions. It's also significant for us to look into the society as instructional tools. Society pertains to every learner as a member of a bigger community. Their affiliations to any group, such as social, political, cultural, etc., means ownership of identity that empowers them to strengthen their participation. Also, society refers to their own stories, their own experiences that need to be recognized. Hence, learners become more active if they can relate and own the process of learning. However, individual stories were not recognized as part of learning tools. And finally, we're into determining the roles of dialogic and community-based engagement in creating critical thinking skills and student-centeredness. The dialogic, which was introduced by Freire through the conscientization, and the community engagement, which are expected to help learners develop and improve their critical thinking skills, and community learning skills, failed to establish its worth due to the lack of collaborative and cooperative learning strategies and approaches in the online instructions. In effect, learners could hardly build their identity as learners, learning agency, and motivation to produce authentic knowledge. In that case, in the modernity of time and with so much revolution in educational philosophy and practices, we're still living in the classic banking model of education, by which teachers dominantly manipulate the process or the learning process. They know, they talk, they choose, they give information, etc., etc. On the other hand, learners remain as passive members of the community as they simply listen, and worse is to accept what they ask us to do, or what we ask them to do. In that case, they are passive, they remain empty cups, they are just spectators and not merely participant in the process. For the conclusions, critical language pedagogy is hardly constructed in online classes because of the expected strategies that support critical thinking were not successfully achieved. This maintains the dominant observation to the banking model of education. That's a sad reality. Minimal possibilities in achieving critical engagement in an online language classroom might have shaped criticality through localized instructions and materials through microcultures. The use of L1, collaboration and cooperation, the use of society as instructional tool. However, these opportunities were not given proper attention. And finally, through critical engagement, it is evident that learners fail to develop and improve their critical thinking skills and community learning skills. This is evident by the persistent observation to the traditional teaching, where teachers dominate the process, while learners remain the passive members of the learning space. For my recommendations, I have the following. First one, it is important in educational system to create and even to recreate an instructional approach where learners are involved. We know these things. Okay, several books, several philosophies already acknowledge learners as co-creators, but unfortunately, it's very hard for us to materialize because they have their own voice or voices necessary to support in building authentic knowledge. Number two, provide more trainings on critical pedagogy in or for language classes. Implement the bottom-up approach rather than the traditional top-down approach. Let's try to listen to the stories of the learners, okay? And let's lessen the practice of too much in standardization in our classroom praxis. Then we have to consider as well the local materials and instructions instructional materials for instructions for the learners to own their learning engagements. And finally, necessary revolutionary acts to rethink critical thinking in classroom practices must be given attention. Okay, with that, thank you very much. And I'm now ready to entertain your questions.
Fascinating stuff, Mr. Julian. Thank you so much.
Welcome back, everyone, to Hall3. I'd like to welcome you again to the first International Symposium of Educational Research Lab. And I would just, again, would like to remind you of a couple of rules, please. For the attendees, please write your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. And for the speakers, please allow me to interrupt 2 minutes before the end of the time. And now let's welcome our presenters, Mr. Hamiso Haruna, who is a lecturer of English at Al-Qalam University, Katsina State, Nigeria. Mr. Ibrahim Bashir, who works with the Saudi British Center, where he taught English language at Jubail Industrial College in Saudi Arabia. And Dr. Muhammad Kabir Kado, who is an associate professor in the Department of Education at Al-Qalam University, Katsina State, Nigeria. The colloquial session is entitled The Disrupted Teaching Norm During COVID-19 Pandemic, A Quest for Alternative Teaching. I would like to welcome 3 of you, and the floor is yours. You can start the presentation now.
So, first of all, as you've rightly introduced me, my name is Hamis Haruna. I am going to present this paper together with Dr. Bashir Ibrahim and Dr. Muhammad Kabir Kadu, titled The Disrupted Teaching Norm During COVID-19, A Quest for Alternative, for alternative teaching. And the paper is divided into introduction, aim of the study, research questions, literature review, methodology, results, discussions, and conclusion. In the introduction, we have mentioned that COVID-19, as we know, is a kind of pandemic that has posed a worrisome challenge on educational sector, occasioned by unprecedented changes to teaching. And as it is a well-known fact that this disruption and sudden changes brought about by the COVID-19 to higher education teaching makes the traditional face-to-face teaching automatically become untenable or impossible due to social distancing, safety regulations, among other conditions laid by the officials. And within the educational dimension, there has been extensive researches discussing the adoption of online modality in instructional implementation in the new normal post-COVID-19 era. Many scholars have written on that, such as Sintema, who wrote on digitalized virtual classroom, among others. And these scholars mentioned that pandemic required educators and learners to shift to emergency remote instruction, often with little prior notice. So while online alternatives to in-person training have been used in reaction to national and regional crisis and disaster by many scholars, COVID-19 happened to be the first global deployment of e-learning in many Nigerian universities, because in Nigeria, this happens to be a new phenomenon for us, because we are used to teaching face-to-face and we've never experienced teaching virtually. So based on this, the research aims at exploring how COVID-19 pandemic was a deep blow to Nigerian education sector, especially to teachers in tertiary institutions. And based on this, it aims at achieving the following objectives based on research questions. Number one, what are challenges that militate against effective online teaching in Nigerian higher education during COVID-19 pandemic? Number two, what are the necessary skills and techniques required for the effective application and utilization of online teaching in Nigerian universities? And lastly, how professional development trainings are relevant to educators in Nigeria during COVID-19 pandemic emergency? Now, as far as our literature review, we mentioned that in Nigerian sector, the COVID-19 pandemic was a deep blow to, especially to higher education sector. Although some few institutions were resilient and quick to adapt to the new normal, the performance at national level was overwhelming, to say the least. And this is obvious because while very few of universities in Nigeria have adopted, have shifted to online teaching, many public institutions did not join. And globally, school closure was announced in the worst affected countries when the crisis began in February 2020. Consequently, about 90% of learners around the world had their education disrupted at the height of the crisis. So some students, particularly those from the most marginalized group, were put at risk of permanent dropout, resulting in long-term and significant negative consequences for children's long-term well-being, as well as the socio-economic development of their community and the countries, because Nigeria is one of the developing countries and it lacks many aspects of development, and that's why many children have to drop out because of this COVID-19 blowout. Now, government in approximately 190 countries had temporarily suspended schools as a result of the health emergency by April 2020. And over 90% of registered students, about 1.6 billion, were compelled to enroll in online learning or dropped out of school as a result of this closure. And this pandemic devastating effect are being seen in most acutely in education. This has been mentioned by many scholars, and the pandemic is both a challenge and an opportunity for education. It is a challenge as it is seen as the pandemic has disrupted the traditional learning paradigm, thus allowing or forcing students to drop out from school and stop learning. And at the same time, the abrupt shift presented issues that some schools and universities were not prepared to address this issue, because it came as a sudden phenomenon, and thus many school management were not ready for that. And as far as our methodology is concerned, the research design we adopted is a qualitative approach. And based on this qualitative approach, we had 8 participants, that is 8 teachers from Al-Qalam University, Katsina, 2 from each colleges, because we have 4 colleges at Al-Qalam University, Kasna. So we have 2 from humanities, 2 from social and management sciences, 2 from education, and 2 from natural and applied science. And the instrument we used in conducting this research is an in-depth semi-structured interview, where we interview the participants based on some questions that were listed in our appendix. And the data collection is a recorded oral interview. And based on this, the theoretical framework adopted in this research is the technology acceptance model. And based on the technology acceptance model by Davis, 1989, it is used to describe the intention to accept e-learning in existing e-learning technology studies. And the second theoretical framework used here is constructivism, which is also related to technology acceptance model. And lastly, the data analysis. In the data analysis, we use verbatim transcription, inductive thematic approach based on Brown and Clark 2006 tapes. And here are they. Here they are. Number 1, teachers' experience in online teaching. And some of the responses we got from the teachers include, number 1, it was challenging and rewarding. It was challenging because of the unstable network, and rewarding because extra effort has to be made to deliver lectures of high quality. This participant is from mathematics department and male. Another participant mentioned that, as always in the case of first experience, but at the same time, it was a lovely experience. Another participant mentioned that it was really interesting and saved a lot of time. And lastly, one participant mentioned that, I understand that we were left behind when it comes to online teaching, and we need to make more effort in order to go with current and upgrade situation. My point of view here is based on the several experiences I had. For example, we were not well prepared for the situation like that of COVID-19 pandemic. We don't have strategic plan in most of our activities, including our career. The awareness we have, both staff and students did not reach the required level. So as we can see from these responses, they all mentioned that it was both challenging and rewarding at the same time. In response to the second question we asked them is the insufficient knowledge of online teaching. And some of the responses we got from the participants include the awareness we have on online teaching, both staff and students, did not reach the expected level. Another participant mentioned that lack of experience about using suggested applications, especially by the students, and preparedness of students to stick to their old habit of using only WhatsApp application, because students here in Nigeria, they only use WhatsApp for chatting and what have you. So the only thing they can do is to manifest or to change the way they use WhatsApp to educational purpose. Another participant mentioned that only one participant, based on these responses, only one participant claimed to have experience on online teaching. And no wonder this participant came from computer science, who said, I did not affect my teaching. It did not affect my teaching, as I already specialize in this innovation since before the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, in response to the third question, that is inadequate support, infrastructure, and resources, some of the participants responded that I spent money by consuming data when using the suggested application, I mean Zoom. Another participant mentioned that we don't have e-learning department in our university. Mostly the online activities at the university were centered on the registration and giving admission. Although we have language laboratory, which was used for face-to-face e-learning activities. And from here, we can understand that the university doesn't have a distant learning department. So the only thing it has is the ICT, where it only uses the online technology for registration, and the language lab where we use face-to-face interaction. Now, in response to the the fourth question, that is lack of student-teacher and peer social interaction. Some students mentioned, some respondents mentioned that inadequate participation of the lecture by some students, which sometimes only 1/3 of them would be in the class. And this is a devastating effect of what? Of COVID-19, because out of, let's say, 50 students we ended up having 15 students joining, and some even go and come and go off. Another respondent mentioned that inability to control the students' behavior, noise making, talking to themselves, etc., that disrupt the class. And last respondent mentioned that network was not very effective, so poor attendance and lack of exposure of such online classes were the challenges. So all these were mentioning the challenges we encountered during the COVID-19 and how we use, online teaching tools in teaching our students. The PIBS question is the effectiveness of combining asynchronous and synchronous teaching modes. And in response to this, some mentioned that I have been using Zoom and WhatsApp platforms successfully to teach my students for almost 3 semesters during the COVID-19 global pandemic. I used to deliver my lecture with Zoom platform for the 40 to 45 minutes and then to send my lecture notes to my students through the WhatsApp platform. Another participant mentioned that using WhatsApp together with Zoom helps substantially harmonizing the learning during COVID-19 pandemic, since most of the students have experience in using WhatsApp. And as we know, because Nigeria is a developing country, so we are used to, having or using low-tech resources. And that is why the teachers have to improvise by, using or supplementing their teaching with WhatsApp that the students are familiar with. In response to the 6th question, that is relevance of teacher development training for preparing teachers to cope with challenges, some of the respondents mentioned that it is from the training that I gained the knowledge of using Loom, Zoom, and webinar. And another respondent mentioned that I participated in the online conference organized by Oxford Library of London. And also I joined some webinars with admission team in China. All these programs encouraged me to be able to use electronic devices to deliver my lectures during the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, another respondent mentioned that it helps me to organize all my lecture notes ahead of time, upload them and make rehearsals in case of any abnormalities that might have happened. And this is to tell you the importance of professional development trainings in making teaching online easy. And now let us move to the second to the last question, which is changes and technical changes. And in response to this, some of the participants mentioned that network was not very effective, so poor attendance and lack of exposure of such online classes were the challenges. Another respondent mentioned that we need to wait until it is restored. This will even lead to suspension of the lecture. And while other participants mentioned that some students did not have smartphone to use, the students always complain of data consumption. While others respondents mentioned that inaccessibility of the application due to connection problem in some remote areas is their major problem. And others respondents mentioned that low attendance from the students as they complain of lack of data, lack of network in their respective areas, or that their handset does not support the Zoom application, among others. And this is to tell you that not all the students even have the smartphone to use the online teaching. And that's why many students were left behind in response to taking their lectures virtually. And on top of this, there is issue of high cost of data from the data subscribers here in Nigeria. So lastly, which is the teacher's suggestion about online teaching, some respondents mentioned that I think the university and the external bodies can support the students with providing a good skills and ICT equipment to them, which will help to improve their learning. Therefore, as a lecturer, I can encourage them to be engaged with the ICT facilities where they can be able to improve their learning skills electronically. Another respondent mentioned that the spread of awareness among students about the ways of using the supported application will help immensely in bringing about the solution to this problem. While other respondents mentioned that when the major challenges are tackled, emphasis are put by the government to restore and upgrade the present condition of our network, then virtual classes might be a good one. Another respondent mentioned that coping with a poor network is very difficult. So from this, we can understand that most of the respondents mentioned that, yes, it is possible to come up with the solution to this problem only when all hands are put on deck to come up with these solutions. And as far as our discussions are concerned,
Mr. Hamisa, can you hear me? Thank you so much.
Yes.
But this is the end of the session, so we need to start a new colloquia session now. Thank you so much. That was really an important presentation. You have raised really important points when it comes to online teaching and learning in Nigeria. I would really like to thank you, Mr. Hamiso, and your team as well. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And Ibrahim Bashir is there for answering questions in case if there are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now allow me to introduce the following colloquia session entitled Undergraduate Students' Willingness to Communicate in English During Remote Learning Classes. The presenters are Dr. Lutfi Abulheja, who is an Associate Professor of English at Yarmouk University in Jordan, Mr. Hamza Maqdadi, who's a lecturer of English at the University of Tabuk in Saudi Arabia, and Mr. Ibrahim Bashir, who works with the Saudi British Center, where he taught English language at Jubail Industrial College in Saudi Arabia. The floor is yours. You can start the presentation now.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to thank you, the Educational Research Lab at Sultan University, for giving us this opportunity to present our research. And I would like also to thank you all for attending this presentation under the title Undergraduate Students' Willingness to Communicate in English During Remote Learning Classes. And I'm presenting this paper on behalf of Dr. Lutfi and Dr. Bashir Ibrahim. And let's move to the agenda of the research. Here, as you see, these are the agenda: introduction of the study, research questions, research review method, results, discussion, and conclusion. Now let's move to the introduction. The coronavirus outbreak has forced schools and universities to shut down almost all physical face-to-face learning activities worldwide. As a result, many schools, tertiary institutions, and universities have shifted from face-to-face instruction to remote tutoring with the students learning from home. However, transforming from traditional face-to-face teaching to virtual online instruction is not without challenges, as it requires instructors and students to adapt to the new pedagogical situations. Despite the fact that e-learning and use of technologies are gaining momentum acceptance in various universities in Jordan, most of the students' engagement are still in form of blended learning before COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, transforming to fully virtual remote learning during the contagious COVID-19 is new to the most students and teachers who were not e-learning professionals. Now let's move to the interest of and personal background. And the inspiration to conduct the study came out of experiences with remote tutoring to a group of students at Yarmouk University and virtually from instructions with instructors from other universities. Among the arising issues discussed is that many of those graduate learners of English showed unwillingness to communicate in English in online classes, despite the fact that they can use various means, such as microphones, chat rooms, or even videos to interact with tutors or other peers. Others believe that students displayed readiness to speak in English and some cases like in asynchronous classes or when they enjoy the topic. And by moving to the aim of the study aims to examine perceptions of Jordanian graduate students who wish to communicate in English during remote learning classes at the time of coronavirus pandemic COVID-19. Now let's move to the question of the study, and here there are three questions. The first one is, what are the levels of graduate students who wish to communicate in English during remote learning classes? The second one is, what are the levels of undergraduate students' perceived communicative competence at the time of remote learning classes? And the third one is, what are the learners' attitudes towards participation in remote learning classes in relation to two affective factors, L2 anxiety and motivation? And now let's move to the literature review. And based on this, we give some conceptual and theoretical review, starting with the concept willingness to communicate. This concept, as we know, that is initially developed as unwillingness, first of all, to communicate, and later was been defined to willingness to communicate in first language and willingness to communicate in second language by various scholars over the time. And due to the allocated time, these are some of the definitions of willingness to communicate. For example, it's a readiness to enter into discourse at a particular time with a specific person or persons. And it's a dynamic situation construct which could likely change from moment to another moment. And here, as you see, the chart is L2 willingness to communicate model, and it's a dimensional, and it consists of various variables from L2 use, willingness to communicate, desire to communicate with a specific person, to many different layers. We have around 6 different layers. It starts from the top, which communication behavior to social and individual context. And we found that few previous studies investigated the L2 willingness to communicate in English in a digital space. Now let's move to the second one. Here are some of the studies conducted on willingness to communicate in a digital context. And because of the time, we'll move to the next one. And I will skip this as well. And let's move to the framework. Okay, here you see the framework model we adopted in this study. We have variables. These variables are willingness to communicate, self-perceived communicative competence, online communication experiences, communication motivation, and L2 communication anxiety as determinant of willingness to communicate in online classes. Now let's move to the methodology. As we see from the table, we adopt a descriptive quantitative approach, and we collected the data from 285 undergraduate students, 118 males and 167 females, and they were selected randomly from Yarmouk University. We used a 5-Likert scale questionnaire, included 61 closed-ended questions. And for the analytical approach, we used descriptive analysis to find the frequency, medium, and the standard deviation. Also, we use Pearson's correlation analysis to find if there is a relationship between the variables used in the study. Now, let's move to the results. We present the results based on the variables or the questionnaires sections of the study. The first variable is students' virtual cyber experience. Okay, the respondents reported an above average endorsement in 10 out of the 12 items about students' virtual cyber experiences. And then interesting findings here revealed that the students have least virtual experiences in communication in English language to friends on social media such as Facebook and Twitter. However, they are following English pages on social media with non-native, and sometimes when interaction with Arab and friends, particularly writing a comment or post in English on friends' social media walls. Now let's move to the second one based on the second variable. The respondents reported an above average of endorsement in all of the 14 situations in which a student might choose to communicate or not to communicate in online classes. For example, in item 26 has the highest mean, which shows that the students speak in English when they are interested in the topics. And I shall move to the next one due to the time. The third variable is self-perceived communicative competence. The descriptive analysis of 10 items of students' self-perceived communicative competence shows that the respondents reported an above average of endorsement in all the items under self-perceived communicative competence. And also, we can see the interesting finding here show that the students believe that they have confidence in asking and answering questions in English during online classes. Item 29 also, they are showed that they are confident about their vocabulary to interact in online classes. Now let's move to the fourth one, which is L2 communication and anxiety scale. The descriptive analysis, as you see, of the data reported an above average endorsement by the respondents in all of the 18 items about students' L2 communication and anxiety scale. Interestingly, almost of the responses were neutral, which indicate that the students have moderate anxiety of willingness to speak in English in online classes. Item 37 shows that students were sometimes worried about being called by their instructor to speak during synchronous online class interaction. And I'll move to the fifth variable, which is virtual intercultural experience motivation. The descriptive analysis of the data indicates that the respondents reported an above average endorsement in all of the 7 items about effective factors and virtual intercultural experience motivation. Item 25 indicates that the students have instrumental purpose of learning English as an important subject in their county. In addition, item 26 indicates that they are willingly interested to speak English outside school. And we move now to the Pearson's correlation results. The results of two-tailed Pearson correlation analysis revealed that there is a medium positive correlation between students' virtual cyber experiences and students' willingness to communicate. Also, there is a strong positive correlation between students' self-perceived communicative competence and the students' willingness to communicate in online classes. And also, there is a strong positive correlation between L2 communication anxiety scale and students' willingness to communicate in online classes. And finally, there is a strong positive correlation between effective factors and virtual intercultural experience motivation and the students' willingness to communicate in online classes. Now I'll move to the discussion of the main major based on the research. Let's start by the major of findings based on the research question 1. The present study found that the students have moderate level of the willingness to communicate in English during remote learning classes, as shown in descriptive and Pearson's correlation between students' virtual experience and students' willingness to communicate in online classes. And willingness to communicate plays crucial roles in L2 learning, as shown in claimant 2003. It's believed that a high level of willingness to communicate may help learners achieve language proficiency. And the findings of the present study is similar to that of Ben Salim's 2021 study, who found that Saudi EFL learners have moderate willingness to communicate in English classes. And let's move to the questions, the major findings based on research question 2. The present study found that the students have displayed that they have communicative competence in most of instances, such as asking questions during the class interaction, and they believe that they don't feel shy to talk in online. However, they believe to be fearing of answering the questions. The findings also are in line with the studies such as Ardiancia, Wijaniata, and ASIF 2020, who observed that online communication can influence one's willingness to communicate in English either negatively or positively, depending on one's self-confidence. Now let's move to the major findings based on research question 3. Based on the findings, the students believe that the two effective factors, anxiety and virtual intercultural experience motivation, have moderate effect on students' willingness to communicate in online classes. Interestingly, all the respondents of L2 communication anxiety scale were neutral, which indicate that the students have moderate anxiety of willingness to speak in English online classes. This was also confirmed by Pearson's correlation results. Now let's move to the next one, which is about the implication. The implication of the findings of the present study for foreign second language learners are quite clear. It's widely understood that when the objective of instruction is communication competence, learner attention should be directed to their willingness to communicate, which is reported to be dynamic in relation to various factors. It concluded that despite the lack of experience of e-learning, the students tend to have good self-perceived communicative competence. One of the main pedagogical implications of this research is examining the L2 willingness to communicate in online space, which is a quite new experience to many students. Okay, the conclusion, the study implied that to increase the students' willingness to communicate in English during remote learning classes, peer interaction should be encouraged and the students' L2 communication anxiety should be reduced. The result of the study contributed to the area of L2 willingness to communicate online space, which is underexplored. And finally, the researchers believe that the study can be replicated to include larger samples, which can be used to apply the findings for pedagogical intervention. And I'm sorry for taking this time, and thank you for listening.
Not at all. Thank you so much, Mr. Hamza, for this presentation. It was an excellent presentation. We really appreciate your contribution to this area of research. Truly insightful. Now allow me to move to the following colloquial session entitled The E-Learning Challenges to University Students During and After COVID-19. The presenters are Mr. Muhammad Salim Raza, who served as a teaching assistant in Civil Engineering Department of Mehran University of Engineering and Technology in Pakistan, Dr. Mira Aftab Hussain Talpour, who's working as an associate professor in the Department of City and Regional Planning of Mehran University of Engineering and Technology in Pakistan, Dr. Tauha Hussain Ali, who works as a professor at Mehran University of Engineering and Technology in Pakistan, and finally, Mr. Shabir Hussain Khahru, who is working as a lecturer at the Department of Engineering Management at Prince Sultan University in Saudi Arabia. Welcome to four of you. And
okay, the topic I am presenting today is the e-learning challenges to university students during and after COVID-19. This has been authored by me and my teachers. Moving on to the introduction. The spread of COVID-19 poses a threat to humanity. This pandemic caused education institutes to switch to e-learning challenges. Despite the e-learning challenges facing this sudden transformation, okay, moving forward, e-learning is the best and only option available to ensure that the pandemic do not spread. Although it has the challenges that can be mentioned from the literature review and that can be found in the results of this study. The aim of this study aimed at investigating the e-learning challenges associated with e-learning faced by various students of Mehran University of Engineering and Technology. So what are the research questions? First of all, what are the e-learning challenges faced by university students? Secondly, how significant such e-learning challenges are? Number three, what are the most significant and least significant e-learning challenges to students at Mehran University of Engineering and Technology? And after all, how do the students rank the identified problems on Likert scale of 5 anchor points, ranging from highly significant to not significant? Coming on to the literature review, there have been many studies on e-learning challenges. First of all, in Saudi Arabia, the e-learning challenges were internet speed and difficulties in online exams and absence of practical classes. For India, the students were subjected to increased screen time, dealing with boring and engaging sessions, and their interaction with society is reduced. Also, the course contents are not up to date as per pedagogical requirements. For Malaysia, the digital literacy of the students was very low, and thus students can be subjected to cyberbullying and online exploitation. Similarly, in Bhutan, many students could not afford internet. Moreover, the cancellation of trainings and internships and recruitment tests have diminished the skills of students. For Egypt, the internet quality is very poor, and the cancellation of training has significantly influenced the learning behavior of students. And again, in India, there was another study which showed that the learning environment is very poor for e-learning. And after that, the economy and technicality is very extremely important issue. Then in Taiwan concluded that students have insufficient gadgets and unstable internet, which hinders quality learning. Also, their workload has increased and socialization has reduced. Similarly, for Australia, there was a poor learning experience with e-learning because of poor connectivity and reduced one-on-one interactions. Also, the workload has increased, which can cause health issues, eye strain, distractions, and disengagements. Similarly, there was another study in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that mentioned the reduced motivation and interaction as a key learning challenge, along with the problems such as isolation, distraction, procrastination, and difficulty in schedule-like problems. Similarly, in Poland, the same findings were found by the Bugzik 2021. Similarly, Matuk in Libya mentioned that increase in workload and consequent isolation are the key challenges. These findings were also confirmed by researchers in Iran. In our study, there was various e-learning challenges were initially identified from literature. Those were drafted in a questionnaire. The questionnaire was propagated among university students. The identified challenges were ranked based on students' perception about e-learning challenges, ranging from highly significant to not significant. For every e-learning challenge, relative importance index was calculated to assign ranking based on perceived significance of corresponding e-learning challenges. This was the formula that was adopted. In the numerator, there is sum of weightages assigned by every respondent to each question, and in the denominator, there are two variables, a and n. N is the total number of respondents; those were 384 in this case, and a is the highest score that is 5. Coming on to the results and discussion, first of all, demographics. In this study, 224 male students and 160 female students participated, 23 each from first and second year. And then moving on to third year, 21% students and 22% students were from fourth year, and 11% students were from fifth year of university education. Coming on to results and discussion, these are the tables for e-learning challenges. First of all, load shedding. Load shedding is considered as a norm in various developing countries. This quest for alternative power sources which increase the cost of e-learning. Secondly, the cancellation of trainings and internships. Due to regulations on physical classes and trainings, the students are subjected to reduced practical learning, and their hands-on experience is becoming very scarce. This ultimately reduces the workability and increases the uncertainties at work. And after that, there is distraction or procrastination, which is on rank 3. Most of the students share the rooms and gadgets, thus they get distracted while learning online. The temptation to other sites on the internet invites students to procrastination. Similarly, for rank number 4, boring and unengaging sessions. Because the e-learning was adopted very much in haste on the short notice, teachers and staff could not prepare themselves for an interesting and engaging session. Also, they tend to cover the syllabus as most of the semester duration was shrunk. After that, there is lack of practical or lab session. This is very similar to the rank number 2 factor, because the halts on physical classes and training, the hands of experience on students are reduced, which will ultimately influence the working ability of graduates when they will be on job in future. And after that, the rank 6 is isolation, depression, frustration, anxiety. So although the e-learning requires isolated environment, but it also brings depression, which triggers frustration and anxiety, consequently influencing mental health of students, which is very alarming. After that, there is increased screen time. So e-learning has increased the daily average screen time of students, leading to increase in reflective errors, which are significantly dangerous in the long run, and sometimes cannot be reversed easily without spending loads of resources. After that, reduced interaction with teachers, parents, and society. Students have been subject to e-learning, which has caused reduction in their socialization and interaction with their parents and teachers. So their socialization skills have not been polished in the pandemic duration. And after that, unreliable speed of internet. This is a very main issue in developing countries. Students in developing countries face this issue very often. Absence of learning environment. The e-learning, when compared with physical learning, has very low learning outcome with a distraction and noise. Adjacent rooms disturbs the students. And coming on to the 11, cost of internet and gadgets. This is also one of the top-notch issues being faced by students in developing countries. The increase in cost of internet and gadgets such as tablets, smartphones, and laptops due to increase in demand and halts on import and export activities. This is the main reason. Coming on to work-home life balance, the increased workload of the students has limited their social activities. With increased assignments and responsibilities, it is very difficult for students to maintain work-home life balance. Coming on to the next 3, lack of gadgets and mobile and laptop. Well, finding reliable internet may be the least of a student's worries if they don't have a device to connect within the first place. Even if they do, they may have to share with other family members who are also attending school online or who has been forced to start working from home. After that, poor and unstructured course content. Because the e-learning was adopted on a short notice, educational institutes could not prepare themselves for structured, interesting, and engaging sessions of course teaching. After that, difficulties in an online examination. Million of people around the people are experiencing technical difficulties because of the high usage rate of online learning systems, video streaming software, and other digital tools. The mastery of IT is not so adequate in various developing countries. This is the main problem. Because of the reduced speed and no prior experience, students face a lot of problems while attempting online examinations. Coming on to the conclusion of the study, so this study basically focused on identification of significant e-learning challenges faced by the students at Mehran University of Engineering and Technology. The results led to following conclusions. First of all, the students face a lot of problems due to interrupted power supply. And secondly, the training and on-site internships have been cancelled, consequently affecting technical workability of students because of reduced hands-on experience. After that, the e-learning sessions are very boring and unengaging. The students get distracted from work and procrastinate to counter the boredom. With reduced interaction with parents, teachers, and friends, students have been subjected to isolation, which triggers health issues like depression, anxiety, and frustration. The increase in screen time has triggered eye strain and consequent refractive errors, myopia, and hypermetropia in students. The speed of internet is very reliable, which hinders the efficient learning. The learning environment for e-learning is nowhere near to that of physical learning. The cost of internet is very significant issues in developing countries. It has become very difficult for students to maintain balance in their work, home, and social life. Students do not have their gadgets oftentimes and thus share with siblings to overcome this issue. After that, because of the e-learning was adopted on short notice, we have discussed it earlier, the education institutes could not prepare themselves for structured and interesting sessions of course teaching. Various students, due to unreliable speed of internet and low IT mastery, face issues in attempting online exam. So if the online exam is missed, there is a great problem. These are the references that have been cited, that have been referred to this study. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad. That was really an excellent presentation. Thank you so much for you and for your team. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions for any of the presenters for the colloquial sessions, can you please write them in the Q&A? Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I would like to welcome you again to the first International Symposium on Educational Research, ERL2021. A couple of reminders again for the attendees, please write your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. For the speakers, please allow me to interrupt 2 minutes before the end of the time. And now the first paper presentation is entitled Highlighting the Pre-Design Bridging Phase in Teaching Architectural Graduation Project, presented by Dr. Iman Sabri Abu Warda. Dr. Iman Sabri is currently working as an associate professor in the Department of Architecture Engineering, College of Engineering, Prince Sultan University in Riyadh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Dr. Iman, welcome to the symposium and please start the presentation today.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today my presentation topic is highlighting the pre-design grading phase in teaching architecture projects. This research was published in a well-known journal, architecture journal, which is Frontiers of Architecture Research in 2019. Here is the main topics in our presentation today. First, the introduction, and then the research method, then the conclusion, the third part. So, as an introduction, the graduation project course is a special type of project-based learning course. Therefore, the educational strategies for this course require continuous development to maintain the effectiveness of course learning outcomes. The greatest challenge for students is often the project starting point, when they must determine the main idea and concept and decide on their priorities accordingly, using the research output in a conscious way and trying to integrate all variables in a single compatible solution to the design problem are a major challenge for the architecture students. The research problem that we have that most of the students find difficulties in translating the data, the theoretical data from the research phase into actions to engage the initial idea in the project through the applicable project phase. So we have two phases in the graduation project in the architecture department, the research and then project phase. The students collect a lot of data in the research phase, write their thesis, they have the project topics, the targets, the research problems, the main goals, methodology. And after writing the research, they start immediately the project. They need a phase in between the two phases so they can translate the theoretical data into applicable project. And they always face problem in this intermediate phase. So the research or the study aims to highlight the transition stage between the research and schematic design phases, which is described here in the study as redesign vision phase. The goal is to propose a practical strategy for bridging the gap between the research and schematic design phases. The methodology that we have today, three parts. First, proposing a new pedagogical framework for the design vision phase. Then conducting a survey among the students to evaluate the efficiency of the proposed framework. The third part is a descriptive and inferential statistical analysis method. We use to analyze the research data and study the correlations between the reflection of the new framework and the student satisfaction toward this their final project. And the research used here, the quantitative and the qualitative analysis studies together in sequential manner. Here, the conceptual pedagogical framework that is proposed by the study that we have to leave enough time for the pre-design phase, which is the intermediate phase between the research and the schematic design phase. The pre-design phase consists of first, as a proposal, information visualization, that it will be shown in the next slides, and then applying the concept development and then the assessment. The assessment chosen was student critique and student self-critique. Here, the mind mapping strategy. Some slides here are showing the product and output of the students' work. After they finish their research, I asked them to start to draw a mind map, try to conclude the research data and conclude the outcomes from the research in this mind mapping strategy. And really, it highlights aspects that were considered key to begin the initial structures. They use charts, keywords, which helps the students keep in mind the project's main goal and methodology. Here, another type of the mind mapping the students started with. They start to write some questions like, what is your main research problem? What are your goals? What's your main methodology? And they start to answer the question with keywords, sketching, and diagrams as shown. Here, the second strategy in our research was the freehand sketching, the second teaching strategy. They use the freehand sketching to focus on the scenario of the project, trying to think about the problem-solving development and communicate the ideas together. They used many sketches and color to express their ideas. They played an essential role in design thinking and affected how they understand and begin solving the design problem. It was a very important stage in translating their ideas and concepts into visual thinking. Here, the third strategy from our teaching strategy was the physical modeling. They use the physical modeling in three consecutive stages as shown here in the sketches to reach the final solution for the initial conceptual form. Here's this sketch is showing the first stage. Here's the second stage, which they merge the 3D modeling and the freehand sketching together. And the third stage, they start to refine and verify the idea and reach the final proposal for the design. The assessment method that I proposed through this study was a student self-critique, and really it was very helpful for this work. It was a module of 8 questions to be answered by students upon measurement criteria, as shown here is the schedule. This criteria was selected to measure the student's degree of success in reaching a conceptual design proposal that is compatible with all the aspects expected to be reached in this stage. Here is the student self-critique phase. Also, some examples of the student work in this phase, and it provides the student self-confidence in defining the project. They taught students how to answer questions during juries. Also, it helps the students a lot in highlighting the positive points and aspects of them. Here, another example for the student self-critique. It was indirectly teaching the students the criticism process, how they can involve in the criticism process. Here's the student critique phase, the second assessment method that I used in my research. The student strategy was applied by dividing students into a group of two and encourage them to judge their colleagues' work and give objective feedback. It allows the students to give and receive feedback on their work, and it gives them the chance to share ideas and exchange knowledge on practical requirements. The second part of our practical study was the questionnaire survey to examine the effectiveness of previously proposed framework. The first four parts of the questionnaire were focusing on investigating the students' interaction level with the applied framework, and the fifth part was from the survey was focusing on measuring the student satisfaction level towards the applied strategy during the class. And here, the method used to analyze the data were descriptive and inferential statistical data. Third part of the study was the statistical analysis method. Frequency table and graph were used to describe the statistical tool, and as an inferential statistical techniques, correlation analysis was used. SPSS software was used to analyze the data as collected data. Here's the findings, reaching the findings. From the questionnaire answers and from the questionnaire results and from the descriptive analysis, here's the schedule showing descriptive characteristics of the study variables, including mean, standard, deviation, and frequency. Here, the histogram diagram for all the collected data in the measured aspect. And regarding the findings for each part, we will talk about the duration. For example, the questions was focusing on the duration of the pre-designed bridging phase, if it's suitable or no, and the students' response showed that the best duration for the pre-designed bridging phase was 3 weeks. To be enough for inspiring them and motivating them in the second stage of the schematic design project. Here, regarding the challenge, the questions about the challenge, the students and the response showed that translating written data into concepts and generating the form language were the hardest part for the student in schematic design. Regarding the teaching method, here from the answers are showing that the mind mapping strategy one of the most helpful strategy during the class, and then the physical model, and then the third place was the freehand sketching. So the majority of the students stated that really they use the 3 phases during the pre-design phase. The assessment strategy. Here the 3 questions showed that the student prefers the self-criticism and peer criticism strategy in the pre-design bridging phase in their graduation project. The post-evaluation, question 11 to question 14 was focusing on the post-evaluation. The students were asked after finishing the final critique for their graduation project to evaluate the final results, and approximately 70% of the students believe that they achieved the mentioned aspect. So it was very helpful, the teaching strategy that was used and the assessment method. It helped the students a lot in achieving the their goals in the project, and really it helped in bridging the phase or bridging the gap between the research and schematic design phase. Here, reaching the test to test the main hypothesis, we had 3 main hypotheses in this research, and here was the testing for this hypothesis. And regarding hypothesis 1, the results showed the positive linear relation between the 2 variables with linear regression, which is shown here in the graph. And regarding the hypothesis 2, it showed also a positive linear relation between the two variables, and in hypothesis 3, a positive linear relation between the two variables with linear regression about 0.5. So, as a final discussion from this research, the students agreed that they need 3 to 4 weeks to work on this phase, really to reach the expected outcome. The majority of the students use the 3 proposed strategies, which is mind mapping, physical modeling, and freehand sketching in this phase to help in translating the theoretical written data. Majority of the students stated that the self-critique strategy helped them a lot to improve the work and organize priorities of the project. The peer critique strategy was helpful to determine the weakness of their proposed ideas and give them useful feedback before the interim criticism stage. The statistical analysis proved how important it is for the instructors who are teaching graduation projects to apply multiple and unordinary teaching methods. And finally, the statistical analysis showed the importance of using assessment methods that the bridging phase of the design studio and not to affect student performance negatively. Then the conclusion, final part of our research about the conclusion. Respecting the individual skills of students and allowing them to feel free to express their ideas in their own special way played an important role in generating outstanding graduation projects. Information visualization strategy helped the students mostly transfer from the research phase to the schematic design phase. The applied assessment strategy mimics the architecture profession by indirectly teaching students the criticism process. And the self-criticism strategy supports the activation of the student's role in self-learning by providing a collaborative teaching and learning environment. As a final conclusion statement, therefore, the study recommends adding the new transition phase to the design phase after the research phase and before the schematic design phase to work as a link between them. The design concept is difficult to reach, hence students need sufficient time and special inspiring teaching strategy in this transitional phase. Moreover, this phase needs an ordinary assessment to give the student area of freedom without being judged and highlight the design problem and the user's need to improve their initial ideas. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iman. If you hear me, that was an excellent presentation. So our next paper session is entitled Flipped Classrooms in Transition, Instructors' Perspectives. The presenters are Professor Hala Delbani is a professor of linguistics in the Department of Linguistics and Translation at Prince Sultan University in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Dr. Safa Isa is an associate professor of linguistics in the Department of Linguistics and Translation at Prince Sultan University, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And Dr. Sharifa Sayyid Ahmed is an assistant professor at the University of Business and Technology in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. The floor is yours, and we're looking forward to hear your presentation, Professor Hala, Dr. Safa, and Dr. Sharifa.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fiam, for the presentation, for the introduction. I think it's a little bit early. Can we start? It's 5 to 3. Shall we go ahead?
Sure. Yes,
it's okay. Okay. So I'd like to start by thanking Prince Sultan University and thanking the ERL team for giving us this opportunity to share our research and to exchange ideas and learn from one another. As you've just mentioned, Ms. I'm going to report, or we are going to report on a research that we actually carried out before COVID. But we never knew that the implications of this research are going to be so important now, perhaps more important than the time when we did the research. We are going to, the three of us are going to be presenting. I'll be introducing the research and the literature review and research methods. Dr. Sharifa will take over to inform us about the findings, and Dr. Safa will be talking about the challenges, the conclusion, and the recommendations that we came up after this study. Now, to start with, we all shifted online overnight. We were not prepared, so we went into what was called, or what's still called, emergency online teaching. We are back on campus, at least I'm talking about us, so that some people may not be back on campus yet, but we have learned so much from that experience. The state of emergency online teaching has taught us a lot of things. And in spite of all the challenges and the issues that we had, there are lots of opportunities that we can make use of. First of all, one of the important things is that we need not to start with new ideas, something new, completely new, innovate, and so on. I think we can build on the things we have learned, and we can use new approaches, not new approaches, adapted approaches, approaches that we started before COVID and learned more about it during COVID and use now and for the future, because technology is here to stay, and we are going to be using it to enhance our teaching practices. Now, what was our research question? Actually, we wanted to investigate the transitional period that usually instructors go through when they are starting to flip. Because we had several training sessions at Prince Sultan University on how to flip, and many instructors started flipping. So we were going through this transitional stage. And we wanted to investigate that stage because from the literature, we could see that most of the studies were focusing on the impact of the flipped classroom on the students. It didn't really do much about or investigate the role of the instructor as such, and the kind of the flipping models that they were using and the challenges that they were facing during this transitional period. So we chose to look into this, specifically into this transitional period, and see how well they were actually aware of what it takes to flip in a way that will help them achieve the learning outcomes. Now, a very quick introduction about flipped classrooms. They are a kind of blend, and everybody's talking about now the future is the blended learning and so on. So it's flipped classroom is one kind of blended learning where it blends the traditional way of teaching with the more contemporary ways, problem-solving kind of approaches. It blends the very old behaviorist approach to teaching with the constructivist approach. It blends the synchronous with the asynchronous environment. Now, the theoretical foundations of the flipped classroom are based on lots of good theoretical foundations. We see it in Bloom's taxonomy, in Dewey's experiential learning, in the Piaget's constructivism, and in Vygotsky's social constructivism. Now, how does Bloom's, I'm going just very quickly to talk about what happens when we invert the classroom, when we flip. Actually, many people take it literally as just meaning what you do in the classroom, you ask students to do at home, and what is done at home is done in the classroom. But it's much more than that. When we are flipping, actually, we are focusing on higher level thinking skills. So instead of doing the lower or practicing the lower level thinking skills in the classroom and letting the students struggle alone at home with the higher order thinking skills, we reverse the process and we do the deeper level in the classroom after the student had already done the lower level on themselves at home. Now, what research tools did we use? We relied on Garrison it as a community of inquiry framework, and we actually used Simonson's flipped requisites, And we also looked into the Moore's continuum of flipping, which I'll be showing in a minute. Now, with regards to Garrison's community of inquiry, Garrison did a lot of work on blended learning, online learning, and he and his team said that in order for online or blended learning to be successful, three kinds of presences, or what they are actually, interactions or features, many words are used here, three kinds of interaction should be there. The first one is the interaction between, it's called the teaching presence, and it's the interaction mainly between the teacher and his or her students. The second kind is the social presence, and it's mainly the interaction between the students among themselves. And the third is the cognitive presence, and that's the interaction between the student and the learning material, the content itself. So according to Garrison and his team, unless all three are catered for, students or the benefit of blended learning or flipped learning or online learning will not be achieved optimally. Now, according to Simonson, there are a number of flipping requisites that have to be there in order for the instructors to manage a flipped classroom well. First of all, they need to understand the rationale behind flipping, why they are doing it, what's the benefit, what's the reason, and so on. Second, they need to be ready to hand over some control to their students. And perhaps that's very important in our context where we get students who, coming from schools, they come with preconceptions that the instructor is going to be spoon feeding them and giving them everything. So they have to be aware, readiness to be, or being prepared to give away some of the control to your students is also very important in to achieve a successful flip. Another important prerequisite is to plan the lesson well, to really try to manage the class time by finding appropriate activities and tasks and quizzes and assessments and all of that to test on the things that students have practiced on their own. The fourth is awareness of the amount of time needed for preparation. It's time consuming, and that was we're going to see later on in our findings how much time is needed for flipping. It also needs knowledge of how to use technology to develop effective teaching materials and assessment tools. It also requires the instructor to be able to reflect and develop as from one classroom, from one flipped classroom to another. It also requires instructors to feel competent. They need to know the course material well, they need to be autonomous, and they need to have support from the institution, and of course they need support from their peers. So all these are very important components for making the flip successful. Now, another thing that we came across in our research is that there is no one single best way of flipping. There are so many different ways of flipping, no single method, no single approach, and it goes according to Moore, it moves along a continuum. The first one is the flipped classroom is when the instructor merely inverts what happens in the classroom, gives it as homework, and what happens at home, he does it with his students, or she does it at home, in the classroom. Now, a level higher up is the flipped learning, where the instructor invests in the class time to use activities and quizzes, assessments during the class time to check on how much students have learned and reinforce the learning through group activities in the classroom or outside the classroom. Now, the level up is the flipped mastery, where the instructor moves a level up to make learning even more personalized. So after the instructor finds out how much they have learned at home or on their own or within the group, then the instructor's role here is to try and cater for personalize and cater for the needs of individual students by giving them specific tasks so that they can achieve the learning outcomes and achieve the higher level thinking skills. And at a more advanced level, flipping will become more like people speak about gamification. So lots of different models. We are not claiming that one is better than the other. It depends on the objective of the class and so on. But there are several levels that, or different types that an instructor can use. Now, how did we do our research? Who were our participants, what was the methodology, and how did we analyze the data? We had 37, actually, the people who were flipping at the time when we did the research and who participated in the study were 37 faculty members from all 6 colleges at PSU. The data was collected on 3 stages. We had interviews, we had surveys that had open-ended and closed questions, and we also requested instructors to self-reflect and to write about the best flip that they have ever made. And the data analysis looked into 2 major things. How aware were our participants of these 3 presences that we talked about, the teaching, the social, and the cognitive, and how aware they were of Simonson's prerequisite. Findings were quite interesting, and I leave you now with my colleague, Dr. Sharifa, to report on our findings, and I think I'll leave it as is. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hi. Thank you, Dr. Hala. Can hear me fine, right?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Can we move to the next slide? So we asked the instructors. Yeah. So as Dr. Hala said, we had some questions through survey, and also interviews and also self-reflection. So for this one, we asked the instructors about flipped classroom definitions through the survey in open-ended question. And the top 3 are the most answered, by them. They're saying it's reverse teaching, it's an innovative teaching pedagogy, and it's a student-centered pedagogy. So these are the main, their definition of flipped classroom. And when we asked them about why, they decided to flip, using the flipped classroom techniques, these are based on the most mentioned in interviews, in the self-reflections, as well as chosen in the survey. If you look at the bottom, the most is the most answered, that they want to use it to engage students, and followed by enhance learning, as well as promote autonomous learning. These are the most mentioned by the instructors, as well as the others, achieving learning outcomes, enhancing collaborative learning, and all these other extra benefits from flipped classroom. And as mentioned previously by Dr. Hala, there's 3 presences, right? The teaching, the cognitive, and the social. So we'll talk about all of them, and we're presenting them, firstly, teaching, and then cognitive, and then social, but based on the survey, the quantitative on one slide, and then the next slide would be the qualitative, more explanation on the items. So for the teaching presence, but before I go there, I just want to tell you that we found that overall the instructors are aware of all these three presences. Yeah. And when we go to teaching presence, yeah, we had several items, and the first, yeah, if we look here, provide prompt adaptive feedback on individual or group works. Yeah, most of the instructors, 90%, agree that it's important, yeah, to do this, as well as 80% agreed that, yeah, they provide a mechanism to assess student understanding, that it's important to do this. And the third one is providing an incentive for students to prepare for class. This is 63%. It's a bit more than half, yeah. And we'll know more, yeah, in their answers later in the qualitative about why that happened. So the first, yeah, when we talk about feedback, instructors, they give feedback inside class and outside of class. Yeah, they give the feedback. And when we talk about assessment, yeah, the instructors mentioned that they have quizzes, yeah, they have discussion forums and classroom discussion to ensure that the students did do the work, right? And when we talk about incentive, not all of them, yeah, give an incentive. So some said that it's based on complexity of the task, yeah, and they don't give the marks, yeah, for all the tasks, yeah. And even an instructor said that they didn't give, she didn't give any incentive. Like if you see interviewee D said that I never give them any marks for the flipped classroom task. That is why I think they are not that serious to watch the video before coming to class. Now we go to the cognitive presence, yeah, and from our survey, the result shows that 90%, yeah, of the instructors said that they provide clearly defined and well-structured guidance, yeah, to the students related to the flipped classroom task, yeah, and 70% said they provide clear connections between in-class and out-of-class activities. And then we also have, yeah, some said that the flipped classroom, yeah, provide an opportunity for students to gain first exposure prior to class. So we explain more, yeah, their answers in the next slide related to the interviews and their self-reflection on these items, yeah. So in giving clear guidance, yeah, some instructors, they already from the beginning of the course, yeah, in the course syllabus, they mentioned we're going to have flipped classroom activities here and here and here, yeah, it's already given to the students. While some say that, you know, whenever they feel they need an activity, they just do, you know, it ad hoc, yeah, for the flipped classroom task, yeah. And even some instructors, they give a roadmap, very clear guidelines about what to do, you know, when and things like that. The next item about connection, yeah, in and out of class, the instructors, what they do is they have pre-class worksheets, yeah, and then in the class they have in-class activity. Some instructors give post-class additional materials afterwards, yeah, if they need to have more information, yeah, they would provide the students that they will be able to search for more materials, and students find, yeah, further relevant sources by themselves when they're doing pre-assigned tasks. Yeah, some students and some instructors told us that their students mentioned that while they're watching the videos, they saw other materials that's related, and they you know, click on the next links related to the topic. And about giving first exposure prior to class, yeah, some instructors, yeah, say that it's challenging to locate the appropriate learning resources. Yeah, for example, interviewee D said that sometimes it's difficult to find a video suitable to their level. Some introductory courses, yes, or based on some topics. So that's why, if you remember, the percent was a bit low, yeah, in the previous slide. Okay, we go to the next slide about the social presence. We found 80%, yeah, agree that it's important to provide technologies that's familiar and easy to access, yeah. And some of them, 53%, a bit more than half said that they provide facilitation for building a learning community. If you look at that, the flip side of it is like 47%, of them find it a bit challenging, to facilitate this student networking and collaboration with flipped classroom. We can see more, in the next slide. So about building the learning community, some instructors do facilitate, and they do it formally via Moodle, through discussion forums, and chat bots. And some, they do it informally, through WhatsApp groups and all that, but some didn't really do this. And they also have team learning activities to engage the learners through problem solving and research activities. And for the others, the other item about familiar and easy to access technology, they agree, that Moodle, that what the university provides, it helps them to upload their flipped classroom, pre-class learning resources on Moodle. It's easy for the students to access. And in terms of familiar and easy access, interviewee G said that the students like this very much, because they can watch the video anytime, whenever they're free. They just click the link and they can watch the video on their mobile phones, at any time. And now I pass it to Dr. Safa to talk about challenges to flipping.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Sharifa. Thank you, Dr. Hala. I think I have 3 minutes to come up with the challenges and the recommendation. You can see that our participants reported 9 challenges. Starting from students' points, because students sometimes they never take it seriously, maybe because some instructor reported that they never allocate marks or grades for any of the tasks, so they don't take it seriously like that. And the time was one of the challenges for both the instructor and the students as well. It takes time from the instructor to prepare the tasks, and will it be applicable for the students to receive or to finish the task during the due time or not. Another challenge was finding the relevant videos. Some instructor might, it might be better, in fact, when you check the literature regarding the FC, an instructor, it might be better for them to create their own videos. And this again takes us back to the time, but when they try to look for videos, the appropriate, relevant video, it takes time from them. But what will happen if some students miss the activity, they miss the class? Will they go back and submit it again, or what will happen? Because they will miss the discussion in class. And this was the first challenge, in fact. Still, students are not ready to have this perception of the FC. They are just waiting the instructor to give them all the data during the class itself. And apart from that, the technology issue, whether with the instructor or the students, the instructor said that they faced technology issues and problems. And if it happened like this, so it might be the material, sometimes it's not accessible for the students, and they come back and they complain about that. Many students, not many in fact, because we have our saving generation now, they are resistant to change. They are anti-change. They need to follow the same traditional way. And for that, the preparation for the material to make it suitable for the students, it might be a bit difficult for the instructor to convince the students with what they need to do. And this will take us to summarize. What did we conclude and summarize from this? In conclusion, we can say that our instructor, they do practice the FC, but at which stage are they? It's really very clear that they are still at the flipped classroom because it's just time shifting. Some of them did wonderful tasks, in fact, and they jumped to the flipped learning, but it's not very clear whether to the student or to the instructor. And I think Professor Hala already explained the 4 pillars here, but what we need, in fact, to reach the flipped mastery, where we married the technology with the approach, pedagogical approaches and the strategy, teaching strategies themselves. And hopefully we have the dream of reaching the gamification, as Professor Hala has just mentioned. And if we conclude, so we need here to give some kind of recommendation. It's not something that's come in one night. We need to plan, the instructor needs to plan this from their perceptions. In fact, you should plan ahead. It's not a must that we flip the whole course. It could be planning to flip just a couple of units. It depends on the level of the students. It might not be for all of the courses, just one course, a couple of units, and this requires training, which our instructor were very lucky to receive a lot of training from Prince Sultan University, and campaigns. Make it clear for the students and for the faculty that it will give them benefits, and it will change their life, in fact, to be student-centered. And if we have some instructors who reported, really, some of them reported that they did practice the FC, and why not don't they share? We recommend that they share, which we have here, the peer support. And above from that, we have the IT, the technology, again, because we mentioned it as one of the challenges. And if we try to think of some of the further studies that might be built upon our findings, because of that our sample was a bit limited, we have 37, and we only implemented our study on female. We didn't reach the male. It might be that if we tried both gender, we can see. And something else, why not? Now we have got what the instructor reported about the perception. Why not we go inside the classroom and observe them, and we see the match between what they reported and what they already are practicing, because we are not sure about that. And we didn't include the students. I know that many papers tried the students, but we need to see as well students' perception. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Safa, Dr. Hala, and Dr. Sharifa for such a well-organized presentation. I personally benefited a lot from the presentation. Now, let's move to the last research paper before we have our break. So our next paper session is entitled Saudi EFL Learners' Perspectives of Implementing Storyline Strategy in Teaching Vocabulary. Presented by Ms. Ala Saleh. Ms. Ala Saleh is a master's student in the English Language Institute at King Abdulaziz University in Saudi Arabia. Welcome, Ms. Ala, to our symposium today, and you can start the presentation now.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. This is me, Ala Saleh, and today I present my paper. I'm a master's student. I'm studying TESOL at English Language Institute at King Abdulaziz University. And as I said, I present my paper, which is about Saudi EFL learners' perspectives towards implementing storyline strategy in teaching vocabulary. In my today presentation, I'll talk about the introduction of this study. Then I will review some articles related to the topic. Then I will present the aim of the study and research questions. The methodology that this study used will be presented after that. Then the results and discussion results and discussions are described in terms of percentages and statistical analysis. Finally, the conclusion and the references will be at the end. So, as we know, and with the development of teaching strategies, many teachers or many EFL teachers are interested in adopting new methods and new techniques. One of the recent strategy is storyline. What is a storyline strategy? It's defined as the method which provides a context in which learners individually and in groups work creatively and cooperatively with helpful instructions which are made by the instructors. So the learners are invited to create a setting and to think up characters and explore plots. And all these procedures should be done with the assistance of their teacher. So the literature said that using this strategy, the instructors can scaffold the learning vocabulary process of the students, and they can push them toward a greater and stronger understanding. This can occur consciously. How? With the pre-process searching, and within the process when the students and learners use dictionaries and other sources. So when they use dictionary, their vocabulary acquisition can improve and increase. Also unconsciously by the interaction with the students. So their discussions, their conversations could help them to improve their English vocabulary. This active learning method creates excitement in the classroom. Sharon Alquist 2019 conducted an experimental study on 60 Swedish pupils, and the study concluded that this strategy helped the students to be motivated in the classroom. Although most studies are conducted on the effect of the storyline strategy on young learners, there is a lack of research on this method in the Saudi context with adult learners. So this research aims to investigate the perspectives of adult learners on the implementation of storyline strategy in the English language classroom for teaching vocabulary, and the relationship with the intrinsic motivation and its relationship with the intrinsic motivation of the adult learners and their interaction during the lessons that apply stories. So based on the aim, this study is guided by three main research questions. How do Saudi EFL learners perceive the implementation of the storyline method in relation to their motivation and social interaction? What are the Saudi EFL learners' perspectives of implementing the storyline method in relation to learning vocabulary? And finally, what is the correlation, if any, between the students' motivation and communication skills during story lessons with their acquisition of new vocabulary? So, to answer these questions, the study adopted a quantitative design to describe a full understanding of the phenomena. The sample was convenience sampling or used or followed a convenience sampling technique to select 80 EFL adult learners in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia from 2 high schools. The schools were public and private, and the participants' age was from 15 to 20. As I said before, this study used a quantitative method. So the researcher designed a survey based on the theoretical framework and the aim of the study. This questionnaire consisted of 3 multi-item scales based on the variables in the research questions. First scale, the intrinsic motivation scale, interaction scale, and the acquisition of vocabulary scale. The final version of the survey was consisted of a total 21 items. And the self-report items were measured using a 5-point Likert scale, ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Also, there were demographic questions to identify their gender, age, and if the school is private or public. Regarding the procedure, as I said before, the researcher designed the survey, then an expert instructor at the ELI revised the items, wording and structure, and how these items are related to the aim and the research question. And based on the comments from the expert, the researcher edited some questions. Then the questionnaire was translated to Arabic, as the learners are adult, and as Harkness said, if the questionnaire is displayed in the respondent's mother tongue, then the researcher gets better qualified data. The piloting study was after that, and the questionnaire was piloted to 10 students who were similar to the target group. The reliability of the survey was calculated to ensure the reliability of the survey. So Crumba alpha was more than 0.7. So the survey was appropriate to be distributed. An online link was sent to the WhatsApp groups of the students, and the researcher used SPSS to check the normality distribution of the scales and to have a descriptive statistic in terms of means and standard deviation. Finally, the Pearson correlation coefficient test was commuted to answer the last research question. So these are the results, and we can see that the learners think that this strategy helped them to work cooperatively in the classroom. So this is, it's assessed them to interact with their classmates positively. And as we can see, the majority of participants think that and agree that it's a helpful and useful strategy to collaborate with their peers. And regarding the intrinsic motivation, using this strategy make the content of English material enjoyable as the participants' perspectives. They also think that it's a fun strategy to do and apply in the English classroom. So finally, regarding the vocabulary acquisition scale, they think that it's a successful method to learn new words, and they think that it makes them better at vocabulary. Regarding the third research question, we can see that there are positive relationship between the three variables, between the acquisition of vocabulary, intrinsic motivation of the learners, and the social interaction, as the correlation is significant and it's more than 0.5. So after the results, we can say that the participants believe that it's enjoyable to use this strategy in the EFL classes, and this result is in prospect with Al-CAF 2017 study. Also, the results showed that this strategy helps the learners to be more motivated and to encourage them in the classroom, which is aligned with the study of Barrett 2010. The findings recognize that this strategy helps adults learners to work cooperatively. And this is in contrary with a study of Alquist to 2012, which gave importance to the failure and its effect on the ideal performance of the learners. So this study said that the interactive activities and collaborative activities have a negative effect on the learners as they feel that their ideal image should be done in a negative way in front of their peers. So this strategy has an effective role in the vocabulary process. Also, this is in line with Pell study. And finally, using this strategy, improve their intrinsic motivation, and this affects the ability to learn new vocabulary. And the collaborative work and the grouping can support their lexical knowledge. This study has two limitations, as it used only survey, so it's only a quantitative method. It's followed only a quantitative design, and the female students were dominated in the participants. So to conclude, this study aims to investigate the perspectives of adult learners towards using storyline strategy in the EFL classroom. The results showed a positive impact on the intrinsic motivation, social interaction, and vocabulary acquisition. A positive correlation between the variables was presented and was resulted from the data of this study. The researcher recommend EFL teachers to be aware of the importance of using storyline strategy, especially with adult learners. And the curriculum should have more tasks and activities in stories, with the stories. For further study, the researcher recommend to explore the role of the teacher as a facilitator, as it's a very important in this procedure, in this to apply this strategy. Also to conduct interviews with adult learners to explain why they prefer this strategy, why their motivation improve using this strategy, why their vocabulary could be improved using this strategy. Also, observation could be implemented to find the practical results of implementing this strategy on their vocabulary and compare it with their perspectives of implementing this strategy. The use of L1 to ease the interaction within the groups could be studied to find if using L1 is a good way to have better results of using this strategy or not. These are my references, and at the end I'd like to tell you that tell me a fact and I will learn, tell me a truth and I will believe, but tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. I'd like to tell you that I thank you and I sincerely appreciate your attention this day. These are my contact accounts and this is my email if there is any further questions. And now I would now be interested to hear from you with your thoughts or questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ala. That was really a crucial point and crucial presentation to all teachers teaching EFL courses. Thank you so much. And we wish you the best in your studies.
Our first presenter is Dr. Joseph Engerman. I hope I'm saying that correctly. From the State University of New York at Buffalo. He's an adjunct professor, and his workshop will be an introduction to quantitative research and statistical analysis in education. So Dr. Joseph, if you want to go ahead and start.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Welcome, everyone. It's in the morning here in Canada. I live right next to Buffalo in the United States, and that's where I teach, but I'm in Canada, so we're 8 hours behind you, but I welcome you. A good evening. I hope you're having a good evening, everybody. My area of research, of course, is in education. I work in science education and in assessment, but I do a lot of quantitative research, but I also do qualitative research. And my experience is that many doctoral programs and master's programs fail to do proper justice to the development of capacity for doctoral students and master's students in terms of quantitative research and statistical analysis. In my experience is that this happens a lot because so many people have anxiety about math. And they think that if they're not good at math, then quantitative research and statistical analysis is not for them. Do I take a course in quantitative research methods? Have you taken a course in quantitative research methods within your doctoral program or your master's program? This is a question. Do I have to take it? I'd rather do qualitative research. So, and the answer is yes, you should. At least one course in quantitative research methods. A bigger problem is people thinking about stats courses, and the stats courses go, of course, collaboratively with the quantitative research methods courses. I mean, when you're doing quantitative research, you need to be able to do statistical analyses. And then, of course, people say, I have math anxiety. I can remember teaching courses when I would ask 25 to 30 students in my class to raise their hand if they really dislike math, and at least 90% of the people would put up their hands saying that, and it would deter them from continuing to do any quantitative research. A lot of professors discourage their students from doing quantitative research, and they'll say to me, my dissertation supervisor told me to steer clear of quantitative research. And that they would be better served by doing qualitative research such as case study ethnography or phenomenology. Well, there's wonderful research that's done with case study ethnography and phenomenology. There's also wonderful research that's done with quantitative research. And for me, I always told my graduate students, my PhD students, my master's students, that you do not let the methodology determine your research questions. You're looking for the gap in the literature. Why am I doing this research? What is the need for the research? What is the significance of the research? And I'm going to choose the methodology that answers the questions I ask, that look into those gaps. Some of them might require quantitative and some might require qualitative, but I don't make the decision ahead of time about the methodology. First and foremost, we're looking at the research questions that I want to ask. So what I've done is I put together in linguistics, my area is, of course, in education, and yet I went through some of the literature and found some very good research done in linguistics that ask questions that relate to quantitative research, that require good quantitative research. So here's some of the questions. What are the beliefs and perceived knowledge of teachers as related to pragmatic instruction and assessment? So what this researcher or these researchers have done is create a questionnaire or a survey. And when you create a questionnaire, again, I advise a lot of professors, researchers, and graduate students on the development of questionnaires. When you do a questionnaire, you just don't put together a bunch of questions and then give it to your potential participants in your research. There are some steps that need to be undertaken in order to determine the reliability and validity of the questionnaire. And so we're looking at a lot of times Likert scale questions in questionnaires. What one must do is to look at the reliability, the internal consistency of this questionnaire. And of course, then one needs to do Cronbach's alpha, Likert scales. And of course, when you do collect data from a questionnaire, you're going to have to determine the statistics, the descriptive statistics that relate to the questions that you're asking and the constructs that are built within the questions. What is the relationship between reading comprehension skills and translation performance? So when you're looking at correlation, when you're looking at relationships, in this case between reading comprehension skills, which are measured on a particular test that you would write, and translation performance, you would look at developing something either whether the data are, it depends on whether you have parametric or non-parametric data, Pearson product moment correlation or Spearman rank correlation. And do female and male adolescents hold different language attitudes towards Welsh and English? So you have, in this case, you have two different factors. You have gender and you have two languages, and you're looking at the dependent variable, which is at language attitudes. So you're going to do a factorial ANOVA. I've thrown a lot of terms out here. Likert scales, Cronbach's alpha, Pearson product moment correlation coefficients, Spearman rank correlation coefficients, factorial ANOVA. Those are scary terms if you're not familiar with them. The point is that they're easy to learn. Yes, it's important that you look at each one individually, that you learn what they mean and you learn why they're being asked as the statistical analysis choice for your research questions. But once you've identified those, they are very easily understood. I find quantitative research, once you understand these terms and have practiced it, are much easier than working in qualitative research, which is a very messy, powerful process, but very messy. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of subjectivity. At least with a quantitative research, you will get an answer that suggests something is happening, and suggests an answer to your research question that is a little more objective. So what are some common types of quantitative research? Well, I put down 5 different measures, different types of quantitative research that a researcher might undertake. And the first, of course, is your questionnaire, which is your survey. When you have, I have 3 different types of data here. And again, more terms, but easily understood once you get practice with it. Nominal data are categorical data. Those are data like yes, no, or male, female. When you always attach a number to quantitative research when you're working with quantitative research data. But what you do in this case is attach a 1 or a 2 or any number at all, different number, to male and female, to yes or no. So you have a number set. Those are nominal data. The distance between 1 and 2, or the number 1 and 2, don't mean anything, but they are just representative of the qualitative term you've used, male, female, or yes, no. Ordinal data are data that are in a hierarchy. So Likert scale data, for instance, are ordinal data. 1 is less than 5. In 1, 2, in nominal data, there's no hierarchy. There's no 2 is greater than 1. They're just numbers given. In ordinal data, 5 for strongly agree is higher than 1 for strongly disagree. They represent, but they're still categorical data. Scale data are the numbers where the numbers mean something in terms of distance between them and also in terms of numerical value. So 10 as an age is less than 20 as an age, and there's a distance of 10 to 20 that is meaningful. So those are the different types of data. When you're working with survey data, you need to identify whether they're nominal, ordinal, scale, so that you can do the proper statistics. We also do descriptive quantitative research, and a lot of this, and very important research, where you're looking for measures of central tendency and measures of dispersion. For instance, a measure of central tendency would be a mean, and the dispersion around the mean is called your standard deviation. And those are important numerical concepts to understand if you're going to do any inferential statistic analysis, which is trying to make inferences from the data. Descriptive statistics, you're just describing the data, giving it some meaning. And then inferential statistics, you're looking at how you're going to answer the questions based on the inferences you draw from the data you've collected. Correlational research, again, we've done that already. We've looked at it. It's about relationships between variables. So if you look here, to what extent is implicit, explicit knowledge of specific grammatical features related to general L2 proficiency. You're looking for a correlation. It's important to know that the difference between correlation and causation is of significance. When you draw correlations, you're not implying causation. Causation is done with the next two, which we're looking at causal comparative or experimental research. And there you're looking at cause and effect. So with causal comparative, it's ex post facto. In other words, the data have already been collected and you're doing a post hoc determination of the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. When I teach my courses in quantitative research, one of the first things I talk about is independent versus dependent variables. Very important to know those. We don't have enough time to go into it, but when I taught middle school, it was in grade 7 where I was teaching science and math that I dealt with these variables. What is a variable? What are independent and dependent variables? And we didn't do the research in that way with respect to statistical analyses, but my students did science projects where they would look at independent and dependent variables. And see, even as something as simple as that is very learnable in this context and something that is very important to understand. So here's an example of a causal comparative type of quantitative research. In the results of the state test of English language competence in the 6th-year primary schools, did the schools that applied Pele programs obtain better results than those that did not? Okay, so what we're looking at here is a causal comparative because we've already collected the data. We are not manipulating the data, they've already been collected. And that's the difference between causal comparative and experimental. With experimental, you're seeing that application of an intervention to determine the effect on the dependent variable. And this is the most important type of research, most important type of research. And this is where you're actually manipulating a variable. So in this case is cognitive linguistics-based teaching of spatial meanings effective in comparison to traditional. So what we have are two groups, an experimental group and a control group. In an experimental group, we're using cognitive linguistic-based teaching, whereas in the control group, we're using traditional pedagogical descriptions. And in that case, we are actually separating them, and we're going to look at whether or not there's an effect of the intervention on the dependent variable, which in this case is spatial meanings of English prepositions.
Dr. Joe, you have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. So inferential statistics, I have a number of different types of statistical analyses that can be performed here. So I'm going to run through them very quickly. We have normally distributed scale data, normally distributed and non-normally distributed. Normally distributed means your bell curve. You know what your bell curve looks like? If your data are normally distributed, then you can do statistical tests that are that are related to normal distributions. For instance, in this case, paired samples t-test. If they're non-normally distributed, then you have to do a different test. It's a non-normal distribution test. In that case, that would be the Wilcoxon signed rank test. Notice both 1 and 2 are comparing scale data, but they're working with matched groups, and matched groups means that what we're talking about here are the same participants with both groups. It's like a pre-post test. So it's the same individuals. And what we have is normally distributed, where we use the pair samples t-test, non-normally distributed Wilcoxon sign rank test. How do we determine normality? There is a test for normality that you can do with your SPSS, which I'll talk about in a minute. Categorical data, as I mentioned before, like nominal data, like gender, or ordinal data, like Likert scale, with matched groups, that is the same individuals, we'd use a NEMAR test. When we're looking at independent groups, for the next two, we're looking at different individuals in the two groups. So we do an independent samples t-test if the groups are normally, if the data are normally distributed, or normally distributed. And the next one, if we're using more than two independent groups, like 3 groups, we do a one-way ANOVA. Determining the relationships, I've already mentioned this, where we do a Pearson product moment correlation coefficient. Some other tests, there are lots of different tests. One-way repeated measures ANOVA, chi-square, linear regression, factor analysis. So I always try to tell my graduate students and the people I work with make the decisions about what statistical analysis you're going to do before the research commences. You aren't looking at it after the fact and saying, oh, I have all this data or these data. What am I going to do with it? What stats am I going to run? Set up your research beforehand. Make sure that you're looking at all of the methodology carefully, and you're determining how you're going to collect your data and how you're going to analyze your data. One of the difficulties that students find is they have to learn to use SPSS. Now, I've used SPSS for the last 20 years. I started with version 10, I believe. And now it's version 28. SPSS is much like quantitative research. Once you begin to get familiar with it, it is so powerful and so useful as a researcher. So again, you need to get SPSS if you're going to do quantitative research and learn how to use it. Now, SPSS is the type of statistical package for the social sciences. And so many people in the social sciences, which includes linguistics and includes education, use SPSS. But there are other very powerful statistical programming or analysis programs like SAS that one could use. Finally, once you get the SPSS data, you have to figure out how you're going to interpret it. And that's another process that takes some a degree of developing familiarity with SPSS and how to interpret the data. It's a lot in 15 minutes. I teach this in 2 or 3 courses. By the end of my courses, my students are looking at research. They're looking at how to conduct, what tests. My thing is, what tests would you conduct here when you're looking at these data? And they become so familiar with it, and they actually really enjoy the learning process with respect to that. So I would recommend losing that fear, looking at research as is required by the questions you're asking, and then learn to do quantitative research and statistical analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph. That was really enlightening. And I agree, it's something that is very stressful, and it brings its own nerves and just fears whenever any student has to think about statistics or think about what research method to use or to apply. These things, it is enjoyable once you get into it, but it is initially very stressful for a lot of students. We have, I think I saw a question about recommendations. So somebody was asking if you could recommend some books that address qualitative and quantitative data in linguistics.
Oh, yes. Now, when I'm looking at, I'm just getting some books out here I might have with me. There are a number of books that I would recommend. Here's a good book right now, I think that I think you can see. Quantitative Research Methods for Professionals is one I would recommend by W. Paul, V-O-G-T. So I'd recommend that book. There are also some great books on statistical analysis. And what you do is, I don't have, I hope you have this one here. Okay, did you get that, everyone? Okay, so that's
I'm
one.
reading the titles out.
Okay. Now there are special books, like for instance, I do a lot of regression work. So linear regression is very much like if you're going to do a Pearson test or a Spearman test, those are tests of looking at correlation or relationships. So here's a book I would recommend if you're going to do the next step up, which is regression. So this book here, Multiple Regression, and this is by Paul Allison. Now, if you would like to send me an email, I can put together a list of books. You have my email address, engemann@buffalo.edu. And I can put together a list of recommended books that I think relate to not just statistical analysis in general, but also the special types. Like when we're looking at something like regression, we'd use Allison's book. But there are some phenomenal books on factor analysis, for instance, that I would recommend you look into. So please send me an email and I will put together a list for anyone who's interested.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. I put the titles in the chat box for anybody that is interested, and Dr. Joseph's email as well. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. Really appreciate it. It was really enlightening. It's a really important topic. You kind of helped to demystify it a little bit, so we really do appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, my pleasure, and have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you so much. You too. Our next presenter is Dr. Fatma Ali. Dr. Fatma Ali is the president of KSALT TESOL, and she was a KSALT TESOL conference co-chair in 2018. She's also a program director of LTAD MA Education, which is affiliated with the University of Derby in UK. And she's a certified IELTS instructor and an IBT trainer and education consultant. Dr. Fatma Ali will be discussing digital skills and competency. Dr. Fatma, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maram. Am I correct? I believe you gave my introduction. So welcome everybody to the digital competency presentation. So my name is Fatma Ali, and I'm the president of KSALT TESOL until 2022. And I'm also the vice director of Master English Education and Training. So one of the first questions that basically comes to my mind when I think of the word digital competency is how digitally efficient are we? With the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of us were actually put on spot, and those of us who were not digitally skilled, all of us, were struggling. All of us were suddenly from experts to we had shifted our roles from experts to learners. So what is really very interesting to note over here is how in a very brief period of time we have actually changed and have actually evolved our teaching practice, how we have actually used the resources and we're engaging our learners. So today we're going to talk exactly about that, and I'd really appreciate if we can interact in this session for two reasons. Number one, this session is not about how to use a teaching tool, definitely not. It is all about are we equipped with the enough skills that is demanded by a 21st century educator. So do you think you're skilled? So let's take a look into that. Okay, you can also use the chat window for responses. Please, I'd appreciate if my presentation is not just a bland presentation, but rather a portal where a lot of us can interact and exchange resources. Okay. Just a second. Yes. So allow me to move on to my slides. Yes. So when we are talking about digital skills, there are two things we are actually supposed to be doing. The first word that actually comes to your mind when we are talking about digital skills is, oh, you know what? At least in my mind, I don't know about the others. Oh, it's all about using Zoom, Microsoft Teams. It's all about using, say, flip, the flip charts, or the flipping tools, or Kahoot, or the assessment tools, or the Quizlet. These are the things that basically come to my mind. But it is way more than that. We are looking into two aspects. We're looking into digital technical skills. We are looking into digital information processing skills. Now, both of them are very different from each other. So, and we need to be digital savvy, or we need to be tech savvy with respect to both of these aspects. So just for about 30 seconds, let's just take a few responses if we can. What do you think is, what do you think are the digital technical skills, and what do you basically think are the digital information processing skills? What do you think is the difference between both? Technically, both of them sound the same, isn't it? So allow me to just do a 30-second information sharing on this one. What do you think is the difference between both? Do we have any responses?
I mean, I would think digital technical skills would refer to, ability to use Microsoft, ability to use these programs that we often use to either create handouts, create presentations, create activities for our classes. I think that's what that would refer to.
And what about digital information processing skills?
I'm still thinking about that one.
Yeah, isn't it? So, there is, there's a thin line of a difference actually between both of them. When you think about digital technical skills, we think about anything and everything that relates to using IT in general. But then when it comes to information processing skills, you just go into that zone where you actually think and wonder, oh, now what does this mean? I mean, are there two different things? So actually we do have a difference. We do have two different aspects when it comes to digital skills. So we have got information processing skills and technical skills. So let's take a look into some of these aspects. So what are technical skills? The technical skills is your knowledge about digital systems such as computers and hardware. So it's not just about unplugging and plugging. It is not about knowing your hardware as such, but in general, you know how to operate, say, Windows. You are looking into troubleshooting. Okay, your computer is not starting. Why is it not starting, right? So you're aware of that kind of knowledge. So this is what we know, what we call are the digital technical skills. The ability to use software applications, like using the right software. Okay, so I'm supposed to get started, right? When it comes to my digital skills. So do I have the knowledge regarding what software applications I need and how I should be using it, how I should be installing it, and how it would help me in making my daily life tasks easier, right? So we're talking about that. And we're also talking about being knowledgeable in security measures, for instance, protecting your hardware and software. So how would you protect your hardware? How would you make sure that your keyboard or your external mouse or your hard drive, anything or everything whatsoever, works for a longer period of time? And then you also have the software. Okay, for software, everybody pretty much knows about viruses, how to protect that kind of software, and also how to keep it updated. So the free update is going to go on for how long? The paid softwares, which ones require payment, etc. So, just so your data is encrypted. So in this way, we are also talking about an essential aspect, and that is about reading the digital contract. In the digital contract, what are your rights? So there are some softwares that keep buzzing you for your location. If you go to some certain websites, they ask you for your location. Some apps, they ask you for your personal information, access to your records. Do you permit that? If you don't permit that, the all software does not work. So you see, all of these technical skills. So it really depends on your proficiency now. We are going to talk about proficiency in a bit, which is the whole idea about the digital competency session today. So, and then let's move on to digital information processing skills. So this is basically the place or the skill set that makes you aware of accessing information, say how to retrieve, locate, and select. I still come across teachers today, I mean, as of today, as of now, where teachers struggle to actually even move from one folder to the other, or how to transfer one file to the other. So, you would know the competency as to where they are standing. And then you also have communication information, like how would you share digital information with the others? Apart from emails, what are your second, third, fourth, or fifth option, right? So we should be aware of that when it comes to information processing. Organizing information. Now, this is somewhere most of us, I mean, personally, even myself, if I put myself in organizing information, I still have a long way to go. So it's all about decoding, restructuring, and protecting the digital information. So we're looking into these three different aspects as well. So yes, we have a comment in the chat window. No, I'm not. No, definitely not. We're not trying to get rid of the IT assistants, but I do feel the IT assistants job, the job of IT assistants is far more refined right now. They are no longer supposed to be helping us with the basic skills. No, they are supposed to be assisting us with something that would that is something that is not mandatory on our behalf. Now, these skills are important. These skills are the need for the 21st century educator today. However, see, for the last one, the organizing information when it comes to digital information processing skills, that is something that I would refer to an IT assistant for. But what if we don't have an IT assistant, right? So we need to have a backup. So this is what we mean by the digital competence. So what are we looking at? We're looking at three levels, and how do we actually rate ourselves? Well, technically it depends on you, but I've compiled a quick list to see to put ourselves into these three basic categories. Into these three categories. So we have got the basic, the intermediate, and advanced. So the users of the basic level, they possess the digital technical skills and information skills to meet the everyday tasks. Say they can start on Zoom, and they can share files, and that's it. They can't really go beyond that. So, and the intermediate level users are those who possess the digital technical skills and digital information processing skills that are required to perform job tasks. It could be anything. So say they are searching through, they know where to go and look out for information, they know the apps, they have quite a bit of information. So those are the intermediate level users. The advanced users, this is where our computer experts or the IT experts, they come in. So these are the users who possess the digital technical skills and information too. To do what? So what is the difference between intermediate and advanced level digital competencies? In advanced level, we are looking at constructing, there's a spelling error there. So it's constructing and creating new knowledge and media, engaging in valued contribution. So they are not just doing the task for the sake of doing the task, but rather they are developing apps. There are some teachers I know during this pandemic, they were actually able to work on a few apps by themselves, and they launched it. And some of them were related to language. Some were more like portals for submitting course tasks and everything. I mean, hats off to them. Personally, if you ask me where I stand, based on information I have coming up in a bit, I would put myself between intermediate and advanced. Maybe if I equip myself with more skills, digital skills, I would reach an advanced level. So that is my aim for 2021. So by the end of 2021, I should be an advanced digitally skilled 21st century educator. That is where I see myself, at least at the end of 2021. So now that we're in November already, so I have a month and a half roughly to equip myself with some of the skills that I still have pending from this list. So what are the must-haves or mandatory digital skills that every 21st century educator should have? I have a comprehensive list of 33 skills, and those skills were actually written in 2015. And seeing myself in 2021, I'm like, oops, I'm still short of about like 10 of them. So if I at least I managed to meet about 5 of them, I'd be able to call myself an advanced level digitally skilled 21st century educator. So the world of today is basically all about the 21st century skills. And what are the skills that are required basically at the school or curriculum level learning? So in general, no, it doesn't matter which field you come from or which subject you teach, but the skills that I'm about to list right now, those are the skills that the 21st century educators need for today. Okay, so let me,
5 minutes
yes.
left.
Okay, great. So this is a comprehensive list. I'm just going to scan through, and all our users can, all our attendees today, they can just mark and see which ones they are already into and which ones they should be excelling in. Okay, so let me start off with the first few of them. So create and edit digital audio. Use social bookmarking to share resources with and between learners. Use blogs and wikis to create online platforms for students, exploring digital images for classroom use, using video content to engage students, using infographics to visually stimulate students, using social networking sites to connect with colleagues and growing professionally, creating and delivering asynchronous presentation and training sessions. So amongst all of these, say we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Out of these 8 skills, how many skill sets do you meet on this page? Yalla, quickly, maybe 10 seconds. I believe I pretty much meet all of them. At least during the COVID time, this is something I was able to work on. I'm not that proficient in editing digital audio though. I'd love to. I'm still learning. I just took up a few courses. Those are the self-paced, self-learning courses. Something I haven't got, since it's self-paced, so this pace has been going on for about a year now. So every time I deliver a presentation, I go like, okay, I need to go back to the course, which is still pending. I have about 2 years subscription of that one. So I guess we are all in that boat where we tend to procrastinate sometimes. So amongst all of these, I still need to master editing digital audio. The rest I've been doing it personally myself. Okay, so what about the next one? Okay, compiling a digital e-portfolio for your own development. So this is very important because these days nobody is going to look for a paper-based CV or your paper-based development. So is there a portal that you have where you display your skills, your achievements, just so your employers or your prospective employers can take a look at? Think about it. It is something that I'm working on right now. It's not launched in yet, but very soon. Be knowledgeable about online security, be able to detect plagiarism in student work, very important, since most of us here are teachers. Create screen capture videos and tutorials. This is something I need to master. Curate web content for classroom learning, using and providing students with task management tools to organize their work and plan their learning. Using polling software to create real-time survey in class. Understand issues related to copyright and online materials and exploiting games. I believe most of us, we are doing this. What are the other ones? Using digital assessment tools for creating quizzes, we do that, or using collaborative tools for text construction and editing, yes. Searching and evaluating authentic web-based content, using mobile devices like tablets, identifying online resources safe for student browsing, using digital tools for time management purposes. This is something I'd love to discuss on in our 15-minute discussion. The tools that you use for time management purposes. Using YouTube in a different way. Again, something that I would love to discuss. Using note-taking tools, yes. Annotating web pages and highlighting parts of the text to share with your class. Again, yes, something that we always do. Using online graphic organizers, sticky notes, screencasting tools, group text messaging tools, conducting effective search query within minimum time, conducting research paper using digital tools, and using file sharing tools and files with students online. Okay, so these are the skills that we are looking for in a 21st century educator. So amongst these 33 skills, if you have 28, if you're meeting at least 28 of them, you would be an advanced level. And if you're meeting up to, I believe the survey said about 18 of them, then you are an intermediate level. And anything less than 18 would be a basic level. So this was our comprehensive list for digital competency. So, so this was my presentation, and I'd welcome any questions that you may have, or we may just open the floor for discussion for the remaining time. I believe we are open for discussions now.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Dr. Fatma. So Dr. Ali Howdy is an assistant professor of applied linguistics. His research interests include motivation theory, research methodology, and complexity. And Dr. Ali Howdy will be discussing peer reviewers, evaluating the evaluators. All right, Dr. Adi, if you'd like to start.
So let's get started. So peer reviewers evaluating the evaluators. So the role of peer reviewers is to evaluate you when you submit your research. But is anybody evaluating their work when they do their job? Is their work properly done or not? And this is a very important question, because if it turns out that their work is not very good, this will have a lot of consequences to the published literature. What can we trust in the literature if the peer review is not, there are some problems with it? And so this is a very important question. It has a lot of consequences. Now, we can look at the credibility of reviewers, and we can look at the credibility of the published literature. That's a different question. I'm not going to talk about that question. We have done some research evaluating, for example, the statistical rigor of published literature, but evaluate reviewers, that's a different concept. They might be related to different things. Okay, so outline. We will first start with the purpose of peer review. Then, is it a valid tool? So the peer review is a tool to select what gets published and what doesn't get published. So we can think of it as a tool. It could be a good tool, it may not be a good tool. Then why or why not? Then why or why not? And whether there is empirical evidence. This is important because you may have your opinion, but we want to look at the evidence. And finally, are there any alternatives? So I tried to make the outline logical and the steps follow logically. So starting with the purpose of peer review, there are two main functions generally agreed upon. First one is as a quality assurance, sometimes called gatekeeping or the epistemic filter. So this is for unintentional errors. If there are mistakes that the author made, you ask them to correct these mistakes, or detecting fraud, which is deliberate falsification. So finding mistakes, whether it's intentional or not. Then we have reviewer 2. So this is a new study published just this year, like a few months ago, about authors' psychological reactions to peer review. And I'm sure you would expect these results, that rejection invokes anger, sadness, and disagreement. Low quality reviews lead to anxiety, anger, and sadness, especially since you are waiting for a long time. So pretty much everybody who has experience with the publication process must have had experiences with reviewer 2. So generally speaking, people feel there is something wrong. Why are reviewers like this? What is going on? What is behind the scenes, let's say? Why is it like this? Is there a reason? Are they really doing a good job or not? So pretty much everybody agrees that something is not right with reviewers. But what is it, So let's look at it more closely here. The validity of reviewers. So somebody called Richard Smith wrote a paper called Peer Reviewers: Time for Mass Rebellion? ? Let's see what he's saying. I have long argued, based on evidence, that publication peer review is useless. This is a very strong adjective to use in this context. Useless, you can say it's problematic, but useless completely? Now remember this, we'll come back to it later. Is it truly useless or not? Okay. There is almost no evidence of the effectiveness of peer review, but substantial evidence that it is slow, expensive, poor at detecting errors. Remember the previous slide, I said that detecting errors, it's poor at detecting errors. Largely a lottery. So it's luck, if you are lucky, you get, easygoing reviewers. If you are not lucky, you get strict reviewers. So there's a lot of chance involved in it. And anybody who has published in journals has experienced this. There's a lot of chance element And who gets to review your paper? Prone to bias and abuse, unable to guard against fraud. So even fraud, not only errors, even fraud, it's unable to guard against it because you are just reading the report, the paper. You don't know what happened before that. And anti-innovatory in that it tends to reject truly original research. And this is true also. A lot of research that's now we consider groundbreaking, a lot of it was originally rejected by reviewers because it is innovatory. So if you follow the mainstream, then you have a better chance of publishing. So is this really a good tool? If it was a drug, this saying goes, it would never be approved. So, you see the language is strong. Who is this Richard Smith? Why is he in February 2021 saying this? Based on what? Now, Richard Smith was the editor of BMJ, the British Medical Journal, which has an impact factor of almost 40. That's a crazy impact factor. People, if they publish in a journal with an impact factor of 0.1, they will be happy and celebrate. This is a journal with an impact factor of 40. So this person has a lot of experience. He's not talking, without experience. So why is this happening? So this is another paper talking about how reviewers are selected. Those reviewers are selected based on ad hoc decision-making by the editor. This is a big problem, right? Ad hoc is luck, as I said, it's luck, it's a lottery. Relevance to content area, known to be reliable or high-quality reviewers, or people she has not asked recently. Even this is a factor because they are not employees working under the editor, it's like, doing unpaid job. Potential reviewers accept or decline invitations based on their interest in the article, indebtedness to the editor, and availability. Even indebtedness is involved in the process. And we call this a systematic process. There are problems here. Okay, let's look at the empirical evidence. I will start with this paper, then we will see other things. So this paper by Peters and Sessi, this is the title, Peer Review Practices of Psychological Journals, the Fate of Published Articles Submitted Again. So in this paper, what the authors did, they said, okay, let's take a group of published papers and send them again, different journals, to journals in the field, and see whether they will get published again or not. And then this will be a test of the reliability of peer reviewers. But it's tricky. How can you do this? How can you design an experiment like this? So let's look at the design. So they selected 13 articles from top psychology journals and the authors from prestigious institutions like Harvard and Stanford. They replaced the author names with fake names and the institution names with fake but low status sounding institutions like Tri-Valley Center for Human Potential. This is a fake institution. If you read the name, you can't compare to Stanford or Harvard. What's this Tri-Valley Center? What's the center? There is a clear difference in prestige in the name. So they submitted these articles, these 13 articles, the same journals within a year of the publication of the original paper. So they argued that if the peer review is valid, this article should be accepted again, especially since they sent the final version. The final version is the best version of that article because these authors, the original authors, when they submitted their papers, they received feedback and they improved their papers, and then the paper was accepted. So they are submitting the best papers. Now, what should we expect the outcome to be? Now, this is how science works. You have hypotheses. The hypothesis is that this paper should be accepted. Why did you form this hypothesis? Because your theory is that peer review is a valid system. And so this is the hypothesis. If, say, some papers received a major revision, then we start to revise this theory. If one paper gets rejected, for example, then you start to revise your theory more. But let's look at the result. So yeah, 10 articles were not detected by the editors because the change of the names and the other things. 3 of them were rejected and returned. So 10 were not detected and sent out for peer review. So let's see what happened. 9 were recommended for rejection resoundingly by both reviewers. Both reviewers agreed that this paper should be rejected. Just incredible. What type of luck is involved in this process now? And they didn't even ask for revision or just reject. You know, these are poor papers, and mostly the reasons were for statistical and design grounds. They have even reasons, you know, this is bad papers. So the authors concluded that these findings were a convincing demonstration of the unreliability of peer review. So just to continue what happened afterwards in this story. So what's the reaction? So some editors were very upset by this study because they felt that they were being tricked by the authors. So some of them even threatened with a lawsuit. People questioned the professional ethics of the authors. Even the department chairman at their own university started threatening them and withdrew all departmental resources from them. So again, the authors concluded that obviously the journal review system has become a sacred cow. You cannot criticize this, because once you criticize this, you open Pandora's box. Who wants to open that box? Just leave it closed, because we will have a lot of problems if these things turns out, you know, true. So again, the authors, you know, they needed to publish their research. So they needed a couple of years and 2 unsuccessful attempts to publish their papers, and personally insulting ad hominem reviews. Finally, they were able to publish it, and then they received letters of support, over 1,000. You can imagine when you publish a paper and suddenly you receive 1,000 letters of support, every one of them was complimentary. There's some people who are feeling that something was not right. Okay, so somebody might say, okay, this is one study. Maybe, you know, if you do this study, if you replicate it, you might find different results. So there's something called the inter-rater reliability, and this is very common. You need to do it in your research. So some people applied this to reviewers. Do reviewers agree or not? Because if they are valid, then they should agree. You know, it's inter-rater reliability. So in medical journals, we would expect, if you do this reliability test, have a reliability of 0.9. It's a very good reliability. Maybe 0.8, maybe 0.7. That's, you know, the minimum we can accept. Remember, this is a high stakes thing. This is what gets published, but doesn't get published. We have to have high standards here. Surprise was the reliability was 0.1. What is 0.1? You remember when Richard Smith previously said the peer review was useless. If you have reliability of 0.1, what type of instrument is this? It's pretty much zero. Whether you have it or you don't have it, you know, it's just nothing. Some people did more research, and then there was a meta-analysis of inter-rater reliability with reviewers. And again, it was 0.7, 0.17. It's very low. So as one researcher did, if researchers wrote up the peer review process as a measure, submitted it for a journal for publication, it would get rejected because of its unreliability. So if you follow this process that the journals follow, in your own paper, you say, you know, I asked my friends based on, you know, availability and indebtedness and people that I have not asked previously, and, you know, some people agreed, some people rejected, and, you know, these are the people I could find to do my analysis based on, and will get rejected. What type of reliability do you have here? But the journals, this is what the journals do. So let me ask a few innocent questions now. Do peer reviewers receive any training? You would think that people who do the review will go through some courses and will be certified before they can be reviewers, but in reality, you just publish one paper and suddenly you become a reviewer. Do they receive any payment? Answer is no. You just do it for free. If somebody is doing something for free, are they going to take it seriously? Do they have time? If you are also busy, you have your own research, your own teaching, your own supervision, your own personal life, you don't get paid, you don't have the time for it, what type of quality are you expect? Is there a systematic way of choosing reviewers? Maybe if you have a systematic way, you can overcome these challenges. No systematic way. Is there a valid tool that reviewers use? No, it's subjective judgment. They read it and they give their opinion. So there are a lot of problems with this process. So it's not only poor process, but it's also exploitative. This is a recent paper published like 2 weeks ago or something. $1 billion donation, notice donation, this is a very important word, estimating the cost of researchers' time spent on peer review. So these researchers estimated that in 2020 alone, over 100 million hours of peer review was spent. And if they were to pay reviewers, it would have been $1.5 billion in America alone. Imagine if you calculate the amount of money. And why is it called donation? Because most publishers are for profit. It's a business. And we are doing the work for free for them. So what type of quality do you expect here? So alternatives. Let's see, how can we fix this? Is there any way that we can fix it? One solution is outsourcing the peer review process. Outsourcing means somebody else does the peer review, not the journal itself, which is a revolutionary idea. So you are saying that the journal should not do the review? Who does the review then? What's the function of the journal? That's a very new concept. So the journal does not do the review? So who is the one doing the review? So this is PCI-RR. It stands for peer community. So this peer review here, peer community and registered report. So basically, this is not a journal. So I want to make it clear. This is not a journal. This website provides a free service for researchers. After you finish from this service with them, you take the outcome and then you go to the journal. Okay, let's see the process. First, you submit a proposal of your study, and then your proposal gets reviewed at that website by peers. They give you feedback. You haven't done the study. Then they give you, in principle, acceptance of your proposal. Okay. Maybe they say there is something wrong in your design, in your sample size, in your instrument, or in whatever. Then you conduct your study while adhering to that proposal, and then you submit the full paper to that service again, PCI-RR. And tell them, look, you accepted my original proposal, and this is my manuscript adhering to that proposal. And then they do stage 2 review to make sure that you adhere to that proposal. Then they give you an acceptance, and then you can take your paper with the acceptance, a PCI-RR friendly journal, and they will accept it without further review. This is the revolutionary part. Imagine journals accepting your paper without doing their own review because your paper has been accepted elsewhere. So this is a diagram. You stage 1 review, and then you conduct your study, and then you get the second round of review, and then you submit it to the journal. So what are the benefits of this process? First, you get feedback before you conduct your study, before it's too late. If you discover by one reviewer that your design was problematic, then it's too late to fix it. It emphasizes design and de-emphasizes outcome, and this is very important. Now, people focus on outcome. Did I get a significant result or not? If no significant result, I can't publish. But it's not your fault that your results were not significant. The focus should be on the design. Did you do a proper design for an interesting question or not? It's not your problem that your results were non-significant. And if you focus on significance and other outcomes, you introduce biases. People will start looking for these outcomes. So this avoids this problem. lowers the pressure on researchers, obviously. So the reviewers here are not looking to reject your paper. You don't have a paper, you just have a proposal. So the reviewers want to help you. Then don't do this, do that, or else you will have a problem later on. So it's their interest to help you improve your proposal. Everything is public, so you can credit reviewers. Yeah, so these are the benefits of this idea. This idea is kind of revolutionary and it's becoming more and more important recently. There's another solution, more revolutionary solution, more controversial solution also. Abolish the peer review completely, just no peer review. So this is even more revolutionary, obviously, than the previous one. So how, if you have no peer review, what do you mean? You just write your first draft and you publish it? Yes, that's basically it. So there's a website called here. It's for post publication peer review. It's not peer review before you publish, after you publish. You can go on this website and you can do your review. Any paper you want in the world here. You can do it anonymously also. So what is the process? Let's look at the process. You submit your manuscript to a preprint repository. There are many repositories available for free. This counts as publication, period. Your first draft is a publication. This is very strange to many people. Review occurs afterwards. And then if you discover a mistake because of the reviewers, you can update your manuscript. Now, if you publish your paper and then you discover a mistake that the reviewers did not discover, it's very hard to update your paper. It's published. Are you going to send the journal correction? You know, not many people want to do that. Are you going to retract your paper? Obviously, not many people want to do that. There is no clear way and convenient way to fix problems after it's published. Here, it allows you to update your manuscript. Other benefits: accelerates the dissemination of information. Usually, in order for your paper to get published, you need like 2 years, a year and a half. You do a study, you wait for reviews, you get rejected, and you go to another journal, you wait for reviews, and maybe get rejected, maybe accepted, and it goes to production and wait for the proofs, and before it's published, and when it becomes part of an issue, it can easily take 2 years. So for 2 years, the community doesn't know about your findings. Why is this delay? So this avoids this problem. You know, the literature becomes immediately available to the public. It separates publication from evaluation. This is very important. So now currently in this system, publication and evaluation are lumped together. If you publish, it means your paper is good. If you don't publish, it means your paper is bad. So what people want to do is that they want to get published. That's the goal, is to pass peer review. That's the goal. If your reviewers want you to do that, then you do that because you want to get published. If other reviewers ask you to do a contradictory thing, the opposite for the other reviewers in the other journal, then you will do that thing also because you want to publish. So the incentive is to get published. If we separate publication from evaluation, incentive becomes impact. Because publication is easy. You just write something in a Word document and publish it. But is the field going to take notice of this? Is it going to have an impact? So the attention of authors now will think, if I write this manuscript, who is going to care? Now the mentality changes. So we have a paper, we discuss other things, the reference is at the end. So
we have a few more minutes left.
Okay.
About 3 more minutes, okay?
I would try, I may need a bit more. So post-publication peer review, there are problems, people who advocate this revolutionary, controversial idea admit that there are problems. One problem is the Matthew effect, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That famous scholars will receive the most attention. Another problem is, okay, if researchers within the field may presumably be able to evaluate the impact, what about journalists, what about the public? So there are problems, and this recent paper proposes some solutions to our advocates this process. So at the end, quickly, I would like to mention quickly some further reading, important further reading. This is an important paper published just this year. Review as an evolving response to organizational constraint, evidence from sociology journals from 52 to 18, over 70 years. And this is a very important paper. If there is one paper you want to read, understand what's going on in the peer review, I would recommend this paper. So the conclusion of this paper is the ongoing evolution of the review model has not been driven by intellectual considerations. Rather, the evolution of review is best understood as a product of continuous effort to steward editor's scarce attention. So this paper traces back the history and the evolution of peer review, and surprisingly, at the beginning, the peer review was very different 70 years than it is today. In the past, there was no revise and resubmit, for example. It was either reject or accept. In the past, you were allowed to submit to multiple journals. You know, it's your paper, it's your right. How can we stop you? In the past, you didn't get feedback if your paper is rejected. The editor said, oh, we don't want to hurt people's attention, egos, and bruise their egos. So it's many interesting findings in this paper, how the evolution university with tens of thousands of students, you are required to have some bylaws and regulations to organize things because you have a large number of students, while the neighboring small institution may not need these regulations. And these regulations are not driven by intellectual considerations, it's just constraints. So they are not sacred, not a sacred cow. You can reconsider them 10 years later, 15 years later, if you need to. This is a paper about scientific peer review. Also, this discusses the reliability and other things. Is peer review a good idea? Publication peer review should be abolished. These people, you know, do not play around. Just, you know, don't beat about the bush. It should be abolished. And they mention their reasons. These are philosophy from the philosophy of science. Publishing as prostitution, another paper. This is an interesting paper where the author argued that, you know, it's from economic theory, acting against one's conventions in order to get a reward. So this is a serious paper from economics theory. These concepts are discussed there, and academics sell their soul, conform to the will of others, the referees, the editors, in order to gain one advantage, namely publication. So the solution was, my proposal is that the editor makes an initial decision whether a paper is worth publishing or not. The referees only ask to give suggestions on how to improve the paper. And finally, this is a recent paper that we wrote. It's available on ResearchGate. It's still in press if you want to read it. Finally, just like Forrest Gump's mother once told him, life is like a box of chocolate. You never know who the next reviewer will be to your paper. So for the time being, we have to deal with reviewers, references, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. That was really interesting. It's, there are a bunch of controversial suggestions there. And if anybody would like to ask any questions, please feel free to email Dr. Ali. His contact information is on the screen. I've also copy pasted his email in the chat box for you guys. Thank you very much, Dr. Ali.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce our ERL lab leader, Dr. Noor Musharraf. She's going to be giving some closing remarks, but I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say, Dr. Noor, honestly, it was such an amazing day, very interesting, a lot of great topics, a lot of insightful discussions were had. And so I'm just gonna clap my hands for you before you give your closing remarks.
Much, Ms. Maram. I want to thank you also, Dr. Ali, for this interesting session, mashallah. I'm gonna, in a few seconds, I'm gonna close the session. It will be the end of our ERL symposium. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very warm evening to our diligent listeners and intellectuals. We're truly glad to have had you for the entirety of this special event. My warmest thanks and appreciation goes to all speakers, presenters, and workshop partners who made a tremendous contribution to the success of the ERL International Symposium. A special gratitude goes to our higher management led by PSU leader, Dr. Yamani. And we don't forget to thank our beloved college, the dean of our beloved college, Professor Mahmoud Al-Mahmoud, and his vice dean, Dr. Aliya Mitchell. We are also so grateful for the contribution of our keynote speakers, Dr. Rima Yahya and Professor Hilary Nessie, and Professor Marina Orsini Jones, and Professor Yanina Gruffler, as well as our influential workshop partners, University of Buffalo, Dhofar University, Kasulat, Rawasan, and Ocean X. Thank you so much. And also, I'd like to ask you kindly to join us through our social media account. We offer many opportunities such as job for researchers, as well as research national and international collaboration. We also offer opportunities for visiting scholars, faculty members, and students, and many more timely activities. So please follow us in our social media accounts that will be posted in the chat box. Further, I'd like to thank all attendees for joining us on this special day. Your presence and participation have enriched this event beyond measure. We hope you enjoyed our symposium as much as we enjoyed your attending it. Here to more ERL symposium to come with just more vigor and just many enlightened mind. We hope that it was very fruitful and informative experience for all of you. And now allow me to say goodbye and have a blessed evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.